Chapter 226. When they heard that she was Shite Clive's sister, the animals' vigilant expressions instantly disappeared. Even Buck Teeth, who had complained just now, deliberately ran to her side and showed a flattering smile. As for Xiao Bai, it sat on the same spot and continued to look at Buck Teeth. Buck Teeth was the one who said that he wanted to fight, and now he was the one who wanted to flatter others. Was a little confused. As for Chirpy, it stretched its neck and looked at them with a puzzled expression. Perhaps it was difficult for it to understand Buck Teeth's wretchedness because it had not fully grown yet. Little Yellow was cold after all. After glancing at Karma Cliff indifferently, it turned around and walked away. Seeing that their boss had left, the lackeys also stopped fooling around. They all let out a strange cry and ran off with Goldie. Okay, come in. It's your first time here, so they don't recognize you. You can come again in the future. At this time, Karma Cliff still hadn't recovered from the frightened cries of the animals. Seeing her like this, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smile. This girl seemed to be fearless, but he didn't expect her to be so timid. Your animals are so smart. If your two dogs give birth to puppies, remember to leave one for me. But obviously Jiang Hai was thinking too much. For a girl of this age, it was impossible to scare her unless she was bitten by a dog. Otherwise, this was the age when one was most forgetful, and so was Karma Karef. Ahem, come in. Hearing Karma Cliff's words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smile. You want the offspring of these two guys? Just wait. Seeing Jiang Hai walk to the villa in front of him and open the door, Shite Clive also pulled his sister in. However, Karma Cliff was obviously very interested in Jiang Hai's manor. Before coming, she also took a look at Jiang Hai's manor outside. She had to admit that Jiang Hai's manor was very beautiful. Especially now that it was early spring, the sky was blue and the ocean in the distance was also blue. In the middle of the blue, it was like a green sandwich. The pasture was located here, and from afar one could see large herds of cattle and sheep coming and going on the pasture. The feeling of cattle and sheep in the wind made Karma Cliff want to play here, but her sister was here today, so she could only forget about it. At the same time, she made up her mind that she would come and play with Jiang Hai the next time she had a break. But when she walked into the villa, she had just made up her mind, but she couldn't help but waver. Because at this moment, there were already many girls sitting in the living room of the villa, chattering happily. She glanced at these girls. Most of them were about the same age as her. Some were a bit older than her, but not much older. There were also two who were obviously much younger than her. When these girls saw Jiang Hai come in, some of them were brimming with happy smiles. However, when they saw her and her sister, most of them froze. Only the two youngest girls, who looked like a pair of sisters, bloomed with the happiest smile. This made Karma Cliff a bit uneasy. This Jiang Hai can't be a pervert, right? He actually has so many girls and they all look quite beautiful. Looking at these girls, Karma Cliff couldn't help but whisper in her heart. Her determination to come here instantly disappeared. You're all here. I miss Daliana and Marion a bit today, so I came to see them and teach them at the same time. Are you guys interested in learning together? But unlike Karma Cliff, Shenty Clive obviously knew about the existence of these girls. Because for her, she also understood and sympathized with these girls' pasts. When Jiang Haigang brought them here, he had already told her about it. Moreover, she had come here so many times and sometimes she would see these girls, so she was not unfamiliar with them. However, these girls seemed to be a little afraid of her. No, we'll leave first. Lunch break is almost over. We still have work to do later. Hearing Shenty Clive's words, Aphrodite, who was sitting closest to the door, stood up and smiled at her. Seeing her gesture, the 7 girls who were still sitting there also stood up. After smiling at Shenty Clive, they nodded at Jiang Hai, then picked up their jackets and walked out. Shenty Clive also understood that these girls were unwilling to have too much contact with her. She knew that now was not the time to force it. Her main students were still Daliana and Marion. After watching the 8 girls leave, Daliana and Marion also jumped up and threw themselves into Shenty Clive's arms, but they were a little wary of Karma Cliff standing behind Shenty Clive. Okay, let me introduce you. This is Karma Cliff, Teacher Xanthi's sister. Today she came to our house as a guest. You have to get along well. Have you had lunch? Looking at the 2 girls in front of him, Jiang Hai hung his jacket at the door and asked them. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the 2 girls glanced at Karma Cliff and then gestured. Jiang Hai knew that it meant that they had eaten. Thinking about it, if he wasn't around, these 2 girls would go to Mrs. Phillips' place to eat. Secondly, with Aphrodite and the other girls around, they wouldn't starve. Although these girls didn't have much cooking experience before, they had been in the manor for a few months after all. In the beginning they indeed only knew how to cook the food. As for whether it tasted good was another matter. After all, they couldn't even fill their stomachs in the past. But after cooking for a few months, although their cooking skills weren't very good, it was still not bad. They liked to curry favor with Jiang Hai, and Daliana and Marian were the most important link between them and Jiang Hai. No matter what, they would completely stand behind the two girls and be on the same side with them. Okay, you sit here and watch TV first. I'll go prepare lunch. Your teacher Xanthi, Miss Karma, and I haven't eaten yet. Hearing the two girls' words, Jiang Hai also smiled. Originally, on the way, he said that he would invite the two girls to Winthrop. But Karma Cliff said that she wanted to eat Jiang Hai's steak. Although Jiang Hai didn't cook well, he still agreed. I'll go help. Seeing Jiang Hai put away his clothes, he went to the cold storage next to him and took out a piece of beef eye to prepare to cook. On the other side, Sheikh Clive was still discussing learning with the two girls. Karma Cliff, who didn't want to watch TV, couldn't help but turn her eyes. After saying something to the three, she ran into the kitchen. What's wrong? Hungry? Don't worry, it'll be ready in a while. Seeing Karma Cliff coming in, Jiang Hai marinated the steak and said to her. He didn't prepare a lot of food for lunch. Cheddar soup, grilled steak, fried cod, fried meatballs and a salad. The staple food was bread, which Jiang Hai always had. No, I'm here to help. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Karma Cliff walked over with a smile. She washed her hands, took the initiative to pick up the vegetables that Jiang Hai had taken out, and prepared to wash them. Don't bother, how can I let the guest do it? Hearing her words, Jiang Hai immediately waved his hand. Ah no, you and my sister are the same age. But it doesn't matter, we didn't bring you any gifts, so it's only right that we help prepare. Don't look down on me, I helped my dad before. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Karma Cliff didn't say anything else and directly started to prepare. She didn't lie. When she was young, when her father was still in the Western restaurant, in addition to cooking the dishes ordered by the guests, he also had to cook the dishes eaten by the people in the Western restaurant. At that time, Karma Cliff, who was still young, learned to cut vegetables in order to earn pocket money. Watching Karma, Karev wash the vegetables and the like, her knife skills were really good. Jiang Hai couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. He continued to cook his steak. He really didn't see that Karma, this little girl, had this skill. Hey, I say, are you interested in my sister? Turning her head and looking at Jiang Hai, who was cooking in the sun, Karma Cliff said to Jiang Hai while cutting things. Well, I can't say that I'm interested, but I admit that I do have some feelings for your sister. Hearing Karma Cliff's words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but choke and said a little awkwardly. Humph, like is like, don't like is don't like, what do you mean have some feelings? You Orientals are moji, but let me say the ugly words first, you should also have some understanding of my sister's situation. What she hates most is people who are unfaithful to their marriage. You see, there are so many beauties in your manner, but you still dare to be so blatant. I'm not very optimistic about you. When Karma Cliff said this, her eyes were always looking at Jiang Hai, wanting to see what expression he had. But it seemed that after hearing her words, Jiang Hai's face did not flash a look of panic, shyness, or hesitation. Instead, it was as if nothing had happened. Oh, you mean those girls just now? Those girls are deaf and mute because, for some reason, they were recruited by me as employees. Don't I have a winery? I haven't found a suitable winemaker yet, so I haven't started work yet. As for Delina and Marian, they are my daughters, your sister knows this, I have nothing to do with them. Although Jiang Hai is not a good person, at least he has principles. How can a rabbit eat the grass near its nest? Winemaker. If you really want to make wine, I have a good candidate. At this time, Karma's eyes lit up. Chapter 227. Sis, tell me the truth, do you have a chance with Jiang Hai? Karma Cliff, who was lying on Shtwenty Clive's big bed, looked at her sister who was sitting at the desk looking at a gold coin and said with some dissatisfaction. Cuff, what do you mean by a chance, what do you know? Hearing her sister's words, Shtwenty Clive's face flashed a trace of unnaturalness. Then she put the gold coin that Jiang Hai just gave her into her treasure chest. Although this gold coin was not expensive, it was the first thing that Jiang Hai gave her, so she must treasure it well. Today the two sisters had 2 meals at Jiang Hai's house, lunch and dinner. Because although there were a lot of police near Jiang Hai's house, he was still in a state of being watched by others. So Jiang Hai did not let the two stay too late. After dinner at 6 o'clock in the evening, he sent the two back. If they were late, for their safety, Jiang Hai might let them stay in the manor overnight. Sis, do you really think I'm a child? I'm already 18 years old, I'm about to graduate from high school and enter university. Hearing Shtwenty Clive's words, Karma Cliff looked at her contemptuously and said to her. Hearing her sister's words, Shtwenty Clive remembered that her sister seemed to have unknowingly grown up. At least now, legally, she has the right to make decisions and have a heart-to-heart talk with her. Actually, Jiang Hai and I don't have a chance, but I admit that I have a good impression of him. After all, if you get to know this man you will find that he is really good. Gently turning around and looking at her sister, Shtwenny Clive also expressed her thoughts in front of her family for the first time. Yeah, if I didn't go to his house I also feel that he is good. He looks a little innocent, he has a good height and a good physique. Although he is not too handsome, he is very manly. Most importantly, he is rich. Hearing her sister's words, Karma Cliff also analyzed Jiang Hai's situation. Hearing her sister's words, Shtwenny Clive's face couldn't help but blush, and at the same time she slowly said, and I feel that he seems to be very concerned about me, but maybe we are both very careful, so I don't know what the situation is now. I knew you two would be like this, that's enough. But sis, do you really think that Jiang Hai is nothing? The 10 girls in his manor, let's not talk about Delina and Marion first. After all, they are his daughters in name. And it seems that he takes care of these 2 girls very well, so he shouldn't have any other thoughts. But do those girls have nothing to do with him? Seeing that Shtwenny Clive seemed to be falling into her own dream, Karma Cliff couldn't help but sit up and say with a serious face. In her view, Aphrodite and the others were her sister's biggest opponents. In fact, they were rescued together with Delina and Marion, but unlike Delina and Marion, they had been in the water for a long time at that time. The reason why I'm not worried is mainly because of Jiang Hai's personality. Maybe you don't know, but Jiang Hai himself is a clean freak. I don't know if he's going to play, but if he wants to get married, these girls who have been in that profession before will definitely not be his choice. Looking at her sister, Shtwenny Clive also smiled. Since she was somewhat concerned about Jiang Hai, naturally she was also very concerned about the girls who appeared around Jiang Hai. The reason why she didn't care about Aphrodite and the others appearing around Jiang Hai was mainly because Jiang Hai told her about his habits. After all, Jiang Hai was not 17 or 18, but in his early 20s. He wouldn't be so naive to think that all the girls in the world who were close to him had their first time, so he didn't expect his other half to be that kind of person. Of course, it would be even better if it was. But at least it shouldn't be so dirty that it would make his heart ache. Just like a spoon, if one person licked it, maybe Jiang Hai could accept it, but if 10,000 people licked it and there was no way to brush it, then Jiang Hai couldn't stand it and could only stay away. In Shtwenny Clive's eyes, these girls belong to the spoon that 10,000 people licked. There is no threat. Really? Did those girls really work in that profession before? It doesn't look like it, those girls didn't seem to have done it yet. Hearing her sister's explanation, Karma Cliff said a little strangely. How do you know? Hearing her sister's words, Shtwenny Clive also smiled. She likes to think blindly. Of course, because I'm the same. You don't know, the girls who haven't done it can be seen. Well, it seems that you don't want to know. Seeing her sister turn her head when she heard her words, Karma Cliff couldn't help but wave her fist in hatred. This guy is too hateful. Doesn't he know that I'm worried about her? Our teacher said that there is a saying in the distant east that you may know a person's face but not his heart. Sister, I think it's better for you to be careful, so I specially arranged an informant for you today. But after all, they are sisters. Karma Cliff looked at Shtwenny Clive's appearance. She couldn't help but move closer and say with a mysterious face. Informant? Hearing her words, this time it was Shtwenny Clive's turn to be surprised. When did this guy learn how to be an agent? Yeah, an informant. Looking at her sister's surprised look, Karma Cliff also laughed. When the clock pointed to 9 o'clock in the morning the next day, 2 men appeared in Jiang Hai's manor. Looking at the 2 men, Jiang Hai's first impression was very good. After shaking hands with the 2 men, he warmly invited them to sit down. Hello, sit anywhere, don't be polite. When the 3 of them sat down, Jiang Hai also went to make 2 cups of coffee and brought it to the 2 men. The 2 men were flattered by Jiang Hai's hospitality. While respectfully receiving the coffee, they also looked at Jiang Hai. While they were looking at Jiang Hai was also looking at them. The 2 men were old and middle-aged. The old man looked about 60 years old. He was about 1.75 meters tall. He was not fat and had a medium build. He had silver white hair, but his face was not like the average Westerners. When he got older, there were more wrinkles on his face. There were wrinkles on his face, but they were few. The most conspicuous thing was his high nose, which was really too high. To be honest, Jiang Hai had stayed in Boston for so long, and he rarely saw such a big nose and such a high nose. As for the middle-aged man next to him, he was a typical white man with blonde hair and a slightly serious face, which made him look a little fierce. He sat there more like a soldier than a brewer. These 2 men were Karma Cliff's informants. This must be Mr. Gerard. He looks younger than the voice on the phone. I heard from Miss Carmacliff that you should be French. Sitting on the sofa opposite, Jiang Hai took a sip of tea in front of him, then asked the old man. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the old man also nodded. Let me introduce myself first. My name is Dulles Gerard. To be exact, I should be a French American. My grandfather's generation was French, but when it came to my father's generation, they immigrated to the United States. But when I was young, I returned to France. This is O'Connor Murphy, my assistant, and also a master white wine brewer. Looking at Jiang Hai, the old man introduced himself and the people around him. In fact, before they came, Jiang Hai also had some understanding of them. According to Carmacliff, Dulles Gerard is a very outstanding wine brewer. From planting, maintenance, brewing, and sugar extraction, he is a rare master. When he was young, he used to make wine in the Burgundy region of France. His manner has won a lot of praise in internationally renowned competitions such as the Brussels International Wine Competition, the Magna Wine Competition, the Bordeaux Aquitaine Wine Competition, the Wine Grand Prix, and other international competitions. He has won a total of 27 gold medals in his life. It can be said that his reputation is extremely resounding in the vicinity of France. The reason why he was familiar with Clive's family was mainly because of Carmacliff's father. At that time he went to France to learn how to cook. One of them cooked and the other made red wine. They were a perfect match, so they became good friends. Later, after Carmacliff's father finished his apprenticeship, he went to South America. The reason why he later settled in Boston was also because of Dulles Gerard, because he lived in Boston after retirement. The reason why he was now ready to leave the mountain was that Jiang Hai's environment was good, and the food was good. It was equivalent to going to another place for a vacation. The second reason was because the business he invested in recently collapsed, and his savings were somewhat unable to make ends meet. As for O'Connor Murphy, who was next to him, he was a German born in the town of Wittingen, Germany, which is also the home of white wine. When it comes to German red wine, it is not good, but when it comes to their white wine, it is the world's first. O'Connor Murphy has been exposed to winemaking since he was a child. When he was young, he once won the gold medal in the Magna Wine Competition. However, after meeting Dulles Gerard, he became his assistant. Over the years, the two of them were like teachers and fathers, and they lived a good life. Before that, he worked at the Boston Wine Tasting Conference. When he learned that his teacher was going to leave the mountain, he came together. After talking, Jiang Hai was very satisfied with the two of them. Gerard was experienced and his own level was good. O'Connor Murphy was rigorous and also quite experienced. Jiang Hai believed that with the two of them and his own aura, it would be strange if the wine of his manor was not good. He was already looking forward to the wine sales of the winery. Chapter 228. Time always passes inexplicably fast. When he was young, he always looked forward to Saturdays and Sundays, looking forward to rest and holidays. But after he became an adult, the feeling of passing days as if they were years gradually disappeared, especially when there was no pressure, no motivation, and nothing else to do. Time always passed very quickly. There was a very good word to describe it: swaying. It feels like time is moving and a long time has passed in a flash. Jiang Hai now feels that his life is very shaky, so shaky that he almost has no concept of the so-called date and time. Because Jiang Hai's life is basically the same every day. After waking up at 6 or 7 o'clock in the morning, he washes up, makes breakfast, and then goes for a run. This is not really a morning run, it can only be said to be exercise. After coming back, he may go to the cowshed in the morning to take care of Xiaoxia, and take it out to ride 2 laps. At noon he will go home for lunch, and in the afternoon he will either stay at home or go out to play by boat. Of course, Jiang Hai's so-called play is mainly diving. At present, Jiang Hai's physical fitness is twice that of a human. In the sea he can already explore it, but after all he is still very timid. Although he can ignore the water pressure, his swimming speed in the water is much faster than the average person, but it is still a lot slower than a fish. Although he is escorted by Dasha, if he encounters a big shark or a whale, it will be troublesome. So he just plays in his own fish farm in the open sea around his fish farm. When he was in the fish farm, Jiang Hai also injected a lot of spirit energy into the water plants in his fish farm. At this time, if someone were to go down to the sea to check the aquatic plants in the Jiang Hai fishery, they would be surprised to find that it was almost impossible for these plants to have been planted for just a few months. The spiritual energy in the Jiang Hai fishery had a much greater effect on the growth of plants than animals. Jiang Hai's current aquatic plants were almost like aquatic plants that had been growing for 5 or 6 years. It was very lush. Among these aquatic plants there are a lot of shellfish, lobsters, king crabs, spotted shrimps, and geoduck clams raised by Jiang Hai. However, these things are still in their infancy state, but their survival rate is quite high. Jianghai's group above the water plants, there are a lot of cuttlefish, octopus and so on. These things also grow very fast. Further up, there are the fish raised by Jianghai such as salmon, American redfish and longzhu. Although these guys are in the state of young seedlings, they are still bigger than cuttlefish and octopus and they feed on these things. In this way, in Jianghai's fishing grounds, a very simple food chain was formed. Jianghai felt that every time he saw these little guys they would grow a little. It seems that the fish in his fish farm are really different from cows. Now Jianghai just needs to wait and make money. In order to trap these fish, Edward Anderson will let Marin Rupert drive the A7802F plane that Jianghai bought every 2 days to dump fish food over the fish farm. These fish food are also specially made. Not only are there shrimp fished out, but there is also beef, cow offal, and the ranch in Jianghai's manor. These fish food are also very popular with these small fish, and eating meat naturally grows much faster than eating cuttlefish. Since Dulles Gerard and O'Connor Murphy were recruited, the 3 major money-making institutions of Jianghai's manor have all been operating. The ranch, the fishery, and the winery have all begun to move in the direction of profitability. Although the effect of the fishery is good, Jianghai is still not sure when it will make money. However, the winery is very simple. According to Dulles Gerard, Jianghai planted a total of 4 kinds of grapes, the most of which is Cabernet Sauvignon. This is the world's most famous wine grape, so it is naturally the first choice. However, Cabernet Sauvignon alone can become the perfect red wine. According to the proportion, some other kinds of grapes must be added, among which are Cabernet Sauvignon and Merlot. The other kind of grape is a kind of white grape, which is prepared to make ice wine and white wine. It is mainly supervised by O'Connor Murphy. This kind of white grape is called Chardonnay. Although they are all grapes, the way to take care of different grapes is naturally different. Fortunately, Jianghai has a lot of people here. As the weather gradually warmed up in March, the planting of vegetables was basically completed. The rest of the maintenance and watering were done by Mrs. Philemon and others. After the arrival of the 2, Aphrodite and the others also officially became bartenders. At first, Dulles Gerard and O'Connor Murphy were a little embarrassed to be commanding these 8 beautiful girls, although they were old enough to be the fathers and grandfathers of these girls. But after all, there is a difference between men and women. However, after seeing that these girls are unusually serious, they gradually became familiar with each other. But to be honest, men are very single-minded. No matter a woman's age, the people they like are different. But since men began to be interested in that, 90% of their fantasies are beauties between 18 and 25 years old. These girls naturally meet the requirements, although they are now masters. But even if they can only watch them work when they have nothing to do, after all, they are very happy to work with beautiful women. Jianghai doesn't know how to make wine, he doesn't know how to grow grapes. After all, he wasn't born in the countryside before. His limbs are not diligent, and he can't distinguish the 5 grains. Although it has been better in recent months, he is still the material to be an assistant when he has nothing to do. In addition to the main business of the manor, Jianghai's personal feelings are the same as before. There is no progress. Stwenny Clive still comes to teach Delina and Marion every 2 or 3 days, and sometimes brings Karma Cliff, but as the 3 become more and more familiar with each other, Jianghai and Sandy still don't have any sparks. In Karma's eyes, she is anxious in her heart, but Jianghai and Stwenny Clive seem to like it very much, so she doesn't need to say more. The United States is very lenient about the love of their children. Parents and parties are not anxious, so it is useless for her to be anxious. In this way, time flowed by unknowingly, almost without giving Jianghai time to react. The cars that Jianghai ordered were also delivered a while ago. The Nouveau Riche Gold Shield, the black and blue Rolls-Royce, and the black Ford E350 were placed in the parking lot of the house, and the whole atmosphere was different in an instant. Among these cars, Jianghai's favorite is naturally his Shield. This car should be driven by a man. Although it is smaller than his F650 and F750, its defense level is several times that of these 2 cars. $2 million for a car wasn't a joke. In recent days, the car he is most willing to drive is this one. Unknowingly, April in Boston quietly came, and the flower buds on the grassland also bloomed at this time. The climate in Boston, because of its location by the sea, is an oceanic climate. The coldest time is not too cold and the hottest time is not too hot, but the precipitation is very high. It is easy to have storms in summer and blizzards in winter. In addition to these 2 points, it is still a very good place. In April, in Jianghai's impression, April in Ice City has just opened, and the weather is still very cold, but in Boston, people have changed out of thick winter clothes. Now, it is basically enough to wear a sweater when going out. Jiang Hai doesn't know about this kind of temperature, but he likes it now. In such a leisurely situation, Jiang Hai ushered in the most important event since he set up the manor. The New York Beef Show is about to begin. Since Jiang Hai bought this manor, he has two purposes. The first is to upgrade his tattoos. The second reason was to earn more money. Not to mention that Jiang Hai only had money in his eyes, there was no one in this world who didn't like money. If it wasn't for his lack of money, he wouldn't have failed in his marriage. Therefore, Jiang Hai was particularly interested in money. As for his beef cattle, to put it bluntly, even if he tied the wine and the fishery together, he would not be able to make as much money as beef cattle. Of course, if you count the fact that Jiang Hai could ignore the water pressure in the ocean and look for sunken ships, then the business opportunities in the sea would be greater. However, if you purely rely on business without this kind of night grass, there was no doubt that beef cattle would be a big business. The New York Beef Show is an exhibition that Jiang Hai is very interested in from the beginning. After a few months of breeding, his cattle have reached the standard to be sold, and this beef show is the best platform to display his manor's sales. The New York Beef Show is scheduled to be held on April 24th. At the beginning of April, Jiang Hai has already submitted his intention money online to rent a large exhibition hall. This exhibition hall alone cost Jiang Hai $1 million. However, considering the number of cows that he could sell in the future, $1 million was actually not a lot. One could not catch a wolf without sacrificing the child. Moreover, $1 million was not a lot compared to cows. As long as he could sell them, he was willing to spend $100 million. After paying his intention money and obtaining the right to participate in the exhibition, Jiang Hai's manor also started to move. On April 5th, they selected 15 cattle to be exhibited. On April 7th, they started to feed these cattle in captivity. On April 14th, they went to participate in the cattle inspection and obtained the right to participate in the exhibition. On April 21st, Jiang Hai's cattle were successfully loaded into the car. Jiang Hai, Robbins Garcia, Belle Lester and Eleanor Cece, who came to help, drove Jiang Hai's Shield and an F-750. They rushed to New York City, which is not far from here. Chapter 229. The sun was shining on Boston's highway. Under the golden sun, a golden armored SUV was also rushing on the road at a very fast speed. Behind this car was a huge F-750. Behind the F-750, there was an extended flatbed. On the flatbed there were 15 cows standing or lying down. It might also be because they ate too much grass nourished by Jiang Hai's aura, so these cows were not as timid as other cows. Even most of the cows were curiously looking at the roadside scenery at this time. Sometimes when they stopped the car they would nibble on the weeds on the roadside. Of course, most of them would just take a bite and stop eating. For them, they were used to the smell of the pasture in Jiang Hai's manor. They had no feeling for these ordinary grasses. Unless they were really hungry now, they would not eat these grasses. However, although these cows did not seem to be afraid, Robbins, the veteran cowboy, still felt that they should prioritize safety. Basically, after coming out of the manor and going to any rest stop on the highway, he would tell Jiang Hai to stop here and observe the cows. Then he would feed the cows some grass and water to maintain their physical condition. Although it was slow, it was stable. After all, they were going to New York to participate in the competition. If the cows got sick on the road, it would be troublesome. They would have to pull the cows from the manor again, which would be a headache. However, this speed was indeed very slow. After walking for about a morning, Jiang Hai and the others had just arrived at the outskirts of Boston. It would take about 2 hours to drive from Boston to New York, but according to Jiang Hai's estimation, it would be good if they could reach New York before 8 o'clock in the evening. However, the only advantage was that the organizers had arranged a cow sheet. No matter how late they arrived, there would be someone to arrange it. At the same time, people like Jiang Hai, who had an exhibition hall, also had 5 rooms. The $1 million were not spent in vain. Naturally, food and accommodation were included. Although it was just a buffet and they would probably stay in an ordinary guest room, at least they didn't have to spend any effort looking for it. At the last rest stop before leaving Boston, Jiang Hai walked down with a purple teacup just as he parked the car. Ever since Jiang Hai became fond of drinking tea, this purple teacup would never leave his hand if he went out. After getting used to drinking tea, he would feel that the taste of other things was indeed a little worse when he drank other things. After parking the car and going to the bathroom, Jiang Hai came over. It was not the first time that Jiang Hai had seen such a thing. He knew that these people had nothing to do here, so since he was here, he was going to Boston. He still had things to buy, so he said, "You guys eat here first. I will go to Boston. Okay, boss. Just take care of the time. We can stay here for up to an hour. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Robbins glanced at his watch. Originally, they were going to have lunch at the next place, but now that Jiang Hai said he was going to Boston, they could eat here. After all, Jiang Hai was the one who paid for it. No need. I will go to Wuxia's store and be back in a while. After nodding to Robbins, Jiang Hai climbed back into his car. After putting down the teacup, he sped up and headed for the northern part of Boston. Indeed, from the highway, it only took about 10 minutes for Jiang Hai to arrive at his destination. Holding the teacup, Jiang Hai parked the car and jumped out of the car. As soon as he finished, he saw the old man who was sitting in front of the store at this time, waving a fan there. Needless to say, this is the store where Jiang Hai always comes to buy things. Uncle, I'm resting here. Looking at the old man, Jiang Hai walked over with a smile. However, just as Jiang Hai came over, the old man's eyes hadn't opened yet, but his nose moved first. Longjing? Sitting up all of a sudden, the old man looked at Jiang Hai's teacup and asked with a puzzled look. Yeah, Longjing, I brought it from China. Tastes good. Would you like to try it? Hearing the old man's words, Jiang Hai also said with a smile. He was still very confident in his tea, after all, it was so expensive. There's no need to try it. Judging by the smell, it is indeed produced in Westlake, but it is not a very good variety. Look at my tea. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the old man couldn't help but chuckle and picked up the small teapot next to him. As the small teapot was opened, a fragrance also went straight to Jiang Hai's nose. The bean fragrance is really refreshing. Well, it seems good. This smell is stronger than mine. Taking the old man's teapot, Jiang Hai smelled it. Indeed, the bean fragrance of this tea is stronger than his own, and looking at the leaves, they are more complete and beautiful than his own. This made Jiang Hai recognize at a glance that this tea should also be Longjing. He doesn't know whether it is from Westlake, but at least the taste is better than his own. After taking a sip, Jiang Hai found that his aura, which was increasing all the time, seemed to be absorbed a little faster. This made Jiang Hai very sure that this tea must be better than his tea. Uncle, where did you get this tea? Returning the small teapot inside to the old man, Jiang Hai asked with some surprise. I planted it at home, haha, when the domestic management was not too strict. I got a few tea trees, but the black tea trees all died, only a few green tea trees survived. These years they have grown well. The tea in this teapot is also Westlake Longjing, but it is not watered with the water of Westlake, so it can only be regarded as Longjing. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the old man said proudly, Then, sir, can you give me 2 stalks? Jiang Hai had the idea of getting tea trees from China a long time ago, but unfortunately China is also not allowed to transplant living things through customs. At least with the current strength of Jiang Hai, he can't get these things. Just like hidden fragrance bead and black goat, these things are not allowed to be brought out of China. If he wants to bring them out, he can only bring made tea leaves. Even fresh tea sprouts are not allowed, which makes Jiang Hai very helpless. It's impossible to accommodate 2, but I can get you a few. Whether you can raise them or not depends on your luck. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the old man did not hesitate but said directly, Jiang Hai usually likes to come here to buy things. Although Jiang Hai brought a lot of food when he came back, there will always be a time when the food will run out, and the food in the supermarket in the United States is not very complete. Anyway, there is nothing that Jiang Hai likes to eat, so he often comes to buy things, and the old man is also very familiar with him. As soon as the old man relented, Jiang Hai also said happily, Okay, thank you, uncle. Maybe for others, a few branches of tea leaves are difficult to raise, but Jiang Hai doesn't care. He can really plant willow trees casually. His aura is not for nothing, and the tea tree planted with aura, Jiang Hai feels that it will definitely give him a different return in the future. Kid, you didn't come back this time just to sell your tea leaves, right? It's noon, it's not like your style. After talking to Jiang Hai about the tea leaves, the old man picked up the teapot in front of him and took a sip and asked strangely, I'm going to participate in the beef cattle show in New York. The beef cattle are now being observed in the nearby rest station. I have nothing to do, so I came over and asked if you have any wine here. Looking at the old man, Jiang Hai said with a serious face, Wine? Isn't it inside? When he heard Jiang Hai say wine, the old man was stunned and pointed to the shelf in the supermarket. It's not the packaged wine. I want to ask if there is any brewed wine brewed with pure grain. Jiang Hai continued. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the old man couldn't help but look at him with some doubts. Generally speaking, this kind of brewed wine has a high alcohol content, and the taste is not very good. It is not that kind of high grade and there is no good packaging. In China, this kind of wine is not easy to find, let alone abroad. Seeing that Jiang Hai actually wanted such a wine, the old man couldn't help but ask, "Pure grain wine? This kind of wine is not easy to get here. What do you want this wine for?" "Didn't I tell you a while ago? I went into the mountains to hunt with a group of people. They all hunted adult male deer. After killing them they took away the antlers and the rest belongs to me. I also came here to buy spices for stewing venison." When he heard the old man's words, Jiang Hai also said. Hearing what Jiang Hai said, the old man nodded. He did have some impression. Seeing that the old man remembered, Jiang Hai also continued. As he spoke, he observed the old man's expression. "In addition to the venison, they also left me a dozen or so deer penis. Originally I wanted to stew it, but when I thought of that thing, my heart felt a little uncomfortable and I couldn't eat it. So later I thought about it and I want to drink it with wine." "Deer penis? Good stuff." Sure enough, when he heard about the deer penis, the old man's eyes suddenly lit up. "Boy, I want to discuss something with you. I will help you get the wine and I will also give you the tea all free of charge. But that deer penis you have to let me have 2, no 3. Looking at Jiang Hai, the old man's eyes also flashed with a strange light. It seemed that he was very interested in this thing. And Jiang Hai saw that the old man really had a way to get pure grain wine. He couldn't help but be happy. Deal. 3 deer whips were nothing to Jiang Hai Lai. If he wanted, he could go into the mountains to hunt for them. However, this wine made from pure grain was not so easy to get. Now he was already thinking about what to put in it. The 2 foxes, one old and one young, looked at each other tacitly and then smiled. Then Jiang Hai and the old man exchanged a few more words, then drove away, returned to the rest station and continued to go to New York. Sure enough, as Jiang Hai thought, when they arrived at the New York venue, the lights were already on. Chapter 230. It's so late it's really troublesome. Looking at the single sheet in front of him, Jiang Hai signed his name and said to the staff in front of him with a smile. He handed over a franklin as a tip. "Hey, it's no trouble. You guys came early. There will be more people coming tonight." Seeing the green franklin, some of the staff members who were a little reluctant immediately smiled and looked at Jiang Hai with a serious face. After a long day of travel, well, actually it wasn't that far, mainly because the car was too slow. Jiang Hai and the others finally arrived at New York City around 8 o'clock. When they arrived at the bullpen and hotel provided by the organizers, it was almost 9 o'clock. Fortunately, because the organizers had considered that this time's beef cattle exhibition was very big, and these cattle couldn't be transported by plane, nor could they be transported by train. The train system in the United States wasn't very developed, so most of the cattle would be sent by car. Therefore, the organizers had already arranged for staff to arrange the bullpen for the participating cattle 24 hours a day. At the same time, they also arranged accommodation for the team's staff. After Jiang Hai arrived, he found the staff who was still eating supper and called him over to arrange a place for his cattle. With a tip of $100, the staff, who was not very happy at first, was grinning from ear to ear. He arranged for Jiang Hai to have the best cowshed in their company. Of course, Jiang Hai was not really naive to think that the bullpen he said was the best, so he specifically asked Rabinsi to take a look. After Rabinsi looked at the bullpen, he nodded to Jiang Hai, indicating that the bullpen here was indeed good. After registering their numbers, Jiang Hai and the others drove directly to the nearby hotel, leaving Rabinsi here to watch. After all, such a public storage place was always a bit unsafe. Of course, they weren't afraid of wild beasts or anything like that, but they were afraid of people. If someone were to go crazy and come here, not to mention killing the cows, just feeding the cows something bad would be enough to make people depressed. The reason why Jiang Hai and the others came with 4 people was because of this reason. They need to take turns to keep watch at night. Basically, the 4 of them would keep watch for 2 hours each. Because the place where they lived was only about a 5-minute drive from here, it was more convenient. After making an appointment with Rabinsi to watch the second shift, Jiang Hai followed everyone to the hotel arranged by the organizer. After entering the hotel, Jiang Hai showed the text message that he bought the booth and the number. The staff quickly verified the number and gave Jiang Hai and the others 5 room cards. However, it was obvious that Jiang Hai and the others did not come with 5 people, but it didn't matter if there was an extra room. It was better to have more than 1 room. Just as Jiang Hai and the others took the room cards and were about to go upstairs to rest, the hotel's elevator also descended from upstairs. When the elevator door opened, Jiang Hai, who was walking in front, and the people who came out of the elevator were unconsciously stunned. What was called enemies on a narrow road? Jiang Hai really didn't understand it before. He thought that the world was so big and there shouldn't be too many opportunities to meet his enemies. But now he found that the world was round and he would meet his enemies sooner or later. At this time a group of people appeared in front of him. It was none other than the people from Cartwright Company. Paul K., who made a bet with Jiang Hai last time, also came out of the elevator at this time, but obviously he was the central figure last time. This time he was just a peripheral figure standing in front of a young man and saying something. When the elevator door opened and Jiang Hai saw him, Paul also saw Jiang Hai, and his face couldn't help but change. Oh, what a coincidence. Does such a big company like yours also live here? Seeing Paul K's face change color, Jiang Hai didn't forget that he still had a bet with this guy. Although $1 million was nothing to Jiang Hai, especially the cattle in his manor, if he sold them all, it would be a terrifying number. But this didn't mean that Jiang Hai would let Paul K go. Jiang Hai had never been a broad-minded person. Manager over here. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Paul K's face turned ugly. If it was any other time he would definitely mock Jiang Hai, but now he had more important things to do. As for the bet between him and Jiang Hai, he naturally knew about it, but he didn't think that his company would lose. Especially after his company developed that thing, he was confident that he would win this bet. Paul, you know him? But when he heard Jiang Hai's words, the young man walking in the middle stopped and looked at Jiang Hai curiously. He could hear the sarcasm in Jiang Hai's words, but he didn't seem to know this person. He's just a farm owner who doesn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Hearing the young man's words, Paul K. also said with a smile. This is the person who made the bet with Paul K. But if Paul K. didn't want to say it, someone else would. It was impossible for a large company to be united, especially when it came to sabotaging each other. They were very good at it. As soon as Paul K. finished speaking, a voice came from the side. I've heard about this before. $1 million, that's not a small amount. Looking at Jiang Hai in front of him, the young man chuckled. Although this matter was passed back to the company's board of directors was not very satisfied with Paul K's gamble, because it had some impact on the company's positive image. But now that they were united against the outside world, this young man would still stand firmly on his side. For me, 1 million is indeed just a small amount, I'm too lazy to bet on less. Hearing the young man's words, Jiang Hai also felt the hostility in his words and gently picked his ear. If you don't give Jiang Hai face, Jiang Hai naturally won't give you face. $1 million for the current Jiang Hai is a lot of money, but he can still afford it. Since you're so confident, do you want to raise the stakes? Seeing Jiang Hai's expression of, I'm a rich man, the young man chuckled and said to Jiang Hai, okay, I don't care. How much? Shrugging, Jiang Hai said with a serious face. Add another 4 million to make it a round number of 5 million. Seeing Jiang Hai's sloppy look, the young man's eyes couldn't help but narrow, and then a number came out of his mouth lightly. $5 million. Hearing his words, not only the people around him, but even the staff at the front desk in the distance gasped. They originally thought that these two groups were just renewing their friendship, but now it seemed that wasn't the case. These two groups had a grudge against each other. $5 million. More than 80% of the Americans might not be able to earn $5 million even if they worked for a lifetime. These two people said it so casually. What did it mean to treat money as if it wasn't money? They had seen it firsthand. However, it was obvious that 5 million had not reached Jiang Hai's bottom line. He only smiled lightly, stretched out his right hand, raised his index finger and said to the young man, let's add another 5 million. 10 million. That's called rounding it up. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, even the young man was stunned, let alone the people next to him. Originally, the girls at the front desk didn't have any thoughts about Jiang Hai's ordinary clothes. But as soon as these words came out of his mouth, the girls' eyes were like searchlights in the dark night. In an instant, they turned on their maximum power and scanned Jiang Hai's body. They really didn't expect that this guy who looked ordinary, had an ordinary figure, and was dressed in ordinary clothes was actually a super rich man. Since he casually made a bet of tens of millions, it meant that this guy's assets were in the hundreds of millions. He was such a young billionaire. Just thinking about it made them feel like their legs were clamped together even tighter. While these girls were infatuated, the young man's eyes narrowed. $10 million was a huge bet for a rich man in the United States. This young man wasn't a good person to begin with. He was the young owner of the Starlit Livestock Company. The Starlit Livestock Company was a joint stock company. Because of its reputation in the eastern part of the United States, the company's total assets were $17 billion, of which the Starlit family owned 53% of the shares. And this young man was the current patriarch of the Starlit family, the eldest son. Otherwise, he wouldn't have taken over the position of general manager of the company. However, although he was the first heir of the family, don't forget that the entire family's assets added up to only $1 billion, and his pocket money definitely didn't have $10 million. If he made this bet, he would no longer be representing himself but the company, because this money would definitely be paid by the company. How do I know if you have $10 million? What if you're trying to get something for nothing? Looking at Jiang Hai, the young man stopped in his tracks. He originally thought that he and Jiang Hai were not on the same level. After all, he was the heir of a company and a family, while Jiang Hai was just a manor owner. However, if Jiang Hai was a manor owner who could take out $10 million in cash at any time, then it would be different. When he said this, he actually didn't want to make this bet anymore. He needed to find a way out. Unfortunately, Jiang Hai knew everything, but he wouldn't give face to those who were destined to be his enemies. There should be more than 15 million in this card. There's a computer here to check. Jiang Hai said calmly as he casually threw the Centurion black gold card in his wallet onto the counter in the distance. Chapter 231. Seeing Jiang Hai's actions, the girls at the counter immediately picked up their black gold cards and checked them online. When the computer screen displayed a number similar to what Jiang Hai had said, the girls' eyes lit up as they looked at Jiang Hai. It seemed that he was a very low-key tycoon. "You're very confident." Narrowing his eyes, the young man looked at Jiang Hai, who had put him in an awkward position. His face was terrifyingly gloomy. Speaking of which, he wasn't a brainless idiot. Otherwise, he would have been swallowed whole by his family. The reason why he had stood up for his employee just now was naturally because this person was his employee. That was how people were. If you hit someone, you could only say that the other person deserved it, but if you were hit, you had to pursue so-called fairness. To be precise, Jiang Hai was the same kind of person. So, how could this guy run away after putting on a show? How could he let that happen? Of course I'm confident. I've always been that confident. Looking at the person in front of him, Jiang Hai chuckled and said, "Let's go." Narrowing his eyes, the man was considering whether or not his bet with Jiang Hai would work. 10 million was very tempting, but he had to have the ability to spend it. He didn't know why Jiang Hai was so confident in his bull, but he was a businessman, not a gambler. Perhaps if he was in the IT industry or a venture capital company, he would have chosen to bet with Jiang Hai. But his company was a livestock company. The biggest risk he took every year was to bet on the price of this year's forage. That was all. His company's profits were small, and safety was the priority. If he really lost this 10 million bet, not only would he lose his position as general manager, but he would also suffer a huge blow to his family's inheritance rights. And if he won, he would only win the $10 million. Although the green dollar was tempting, it wasn't enough for him to make such a fatal mistake. So, after glancing at Jiang Hai, he turned around and spoke directly to the people next to him. "Hey, you're leaving already? Otherwise we'll do as you say. 5 million is fine too." Looking at the backs of these people leaving, Jiang Hai couldn't help but shout loudly. Although these people didn't know what Jiang Hai was thinking, since he dared to shout like that, the young man had to be careful. Looking at the people leaving quickly, Jiang Hai couldn't help but chuckle. Seeing Jiang Hai's smile, Belle Lester walked over and said with a chuckle, "He didn't take the bait, boss." In fact, it wasn't just Jiang Hai who was very confident in their cows. Everyone else was also quite confident in their cows. After all, those cows were personally raised by them, and they were also newbies who had killed them. The probability of special grade A frost beef appearing was as high as 100%. This winter they had killed a lot of cows, all of which were relatively thin and weak. There was not a single cow that did not have special grade A beef. It was just that the percentage of meat produced was somewhat different. And this type of beef had always been a super killer in the beef industry. The reason why Japanese Wagyu were so amazing and could enjoy such a life was that these bulls who enjoyed such a life had a high probability of producing this type of beef. But even if the probability was high, it wasn't 100%. But Jiang Hai had a 100% success rate. As long as nothing happened to his bull this time, his manor and his beef would definitely become a hit. You can't treat everyone as fools. Let's go back to sleep. Jiang Hai was a little surprised that this person wasn't dizzy with the $10 million. Didn't they say that the protagonist had a halo that lowered his IQ? Even if the protagonist's IQ was low, the opponent's IQ would definitely be lower than the protagonist's. But recently Jiang Hai found that his opponent's IQ didn't seem to be lower than his. In the whole world his physical fitness was absolutely top, but the problem with his IQ was, at least he didn't think that he was very smart. Shrugging his shoulders with Belle, Jiang Hai walked into the elevator first. When the elevator reached their floor, he gave each of them a key and walked into their respective rooms. Because Jiang Hai only brought 4 people with him this time, there were 5 rooms. Not only was there an empty room, but if this room was also a standard room with 2 beds, then it would be a waste. So Jiang Hai asked for a room with 1 big bed. It was good that each person had a room. Walking into his room, Jiang Hai first took a shower and then had a good rest. After driving for a day, although he rested from time to time at the rest station, he still felt a little tired. Not physically but mentally. Soaking in a hot bath was much more comfortable. After taking a shower, Jiang Hai sat on the sofa and watched TV. After waiting for almost 2 hours, he drove the F-750 to change with Robins. He didn't want his shield baby to be controlled by other men. His novelty hadn't passed yet. Resting in the cowshed was naturally different from resting in the hotel. Not only was there a cold wind blowing, but there was also a smell of cow dung. There were people in each cowshed, but these people hardly talked because they needed to focus more on their own cows. Jiang Hai also lay on the chair and played with his phone for 2 hours. Belle came to change with him. After returning to the hotel, he had a good sleep. The next morning, Jiang Hai, Robins and Belle, who had just returned, went to the cowshed together. Belle and Eleanor Cece were left to guard the cows, while Jiang Hai and Robins went to the venue. There were a lot of things they needed to confirm here, such as their booth, the security of their booth, the promotional materials, and the protection of the iron fence. If there were any problems, they could immediately ask the organizer for help. Fortunately, the organizers received a lot of money this time and prepared everything very well. The $1 million booth really did have the effect of $1 million because Jiang Hai didn't have that many cows in the exhibition, only 15 of them. So the place wasn't very big, but the location was the best. After entering the exhibition hall, it was the first third of the street facing the front. There were no private cowsheds next to him. They were all owned by livestock companies. The Cartwright Company, which had a grudge against Jiang Hai, was behind him, but it took up a lot more space than Jiang Hai. While Jiang Hai and Robins were checking the facilities here, the people from the Cartwright Company also came to check. When they saw Jiang Hai, the young leader couldn't help but chuckle. Although he didn't dare to accept Jiang Hai's $10 million bet, it didn't stop him from looking down on Jiang Hai. A small private manor dared to challenge a big company like his. He had already decided that this time, Jiang Hai wouldn't be able to sell a single cow. His subordinates naturally knew what he was thinking, so before they came, they specifically explained to the 2 companies beside Jiang Hai. Although one of the 2 companies was in the central and the other in the west, they weren't smaller than the Cartwright Company. But after all, they were in the east, and this was the Cartwright Company's territory. As the saying goes, a strong dragon can't suppress a snake in its old haunts. Besides, they were just giving face and didn't need to do anything. So Jiang Hai and the others seemed to be isolated. Jiang Hai was busy here for a long time. Other than the staff who came to deliver water and ask if there was anything he needed, no one from the 2 companies spoke to Jiang Hai again. For others, this kind of atmosphere was a little depressing, but for Jiang Hai it didn't matter. Because he didn't plan to talk to others, it was actually good for everyone to do their own things. After a busy day, Jiang Hai specially ordered a table full of dishes at the hotel where they were staying. This could also be considered as giving his brothers some encouragement in advance. These past few days, Robins, Belle and Eleanor Cece, who came to help, were all very tired. Eating a good meal could also warm their hearts a little. On the 21st, the cows were sent to the exhibition area. On the 22nd, the equipment in the exhibition area was inspected. On the 23rd, the cows were released for testing. At 8 o'clock in the morning on the 24th, the new New York American Eastern Beef Cattle Exhibition officially opened. Although it was not like any other exhibition in China where there were lanterns, streamers and firecrackers, since the morning of the 24th, there was a traffic jam on the road near the exhibition hall. Cars drove into the parking lot of the exhibition hall from the intersection. After all, it was a large-scale livestock exhibition, so it couldn't be held in New York City. Although New York City was in the name of New York, it was actually in the suburbs. Not far from New Jersey was New York. However, although it was in a remote place, it didn't stop the enthusiasm of others. Buyers from large Western restaurants, large hotels, large supermarkets, and even small supermarkets all came. All of a sudden, the originally deserted exhibition became crowded with people and carriages. In the sea of people, Jiang Hai and the others sat in front of their own exhibition hall. Looking at the huge flow of people in front of them and the performance of the other shops, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smack his lips. He suddenly felt that he was a little too naive. Originally, he thought that the beef cattle exhibition was probably similar to the domestic agricultural products exhibition and recommendation. It was just putting things there and interested people would come and ask and take a look. That was all. In the winter he also went to the beef cattle exhibition in Massachusetts, and it was basically similar. But it turned out that he thought too little. At this time the companies in front of him were not beef cattle exhibitions, but game exhibitions. Chapter 232. Welcome to the Prussian Cattle Company. Our company's beef cattle are all raised in Montana. They drink mountain spring water and eat fresh grass. Their meat is delicious, well-proportioned, and delicate. Please come to our Charles Livestock Company. Our cattle farms are all over the world. We have cattle farms in Asia, Europe, and America. Our beef here is top-notch and the probability of marbling is very high. Welcome to our Kawasaki Livestock Company. Come to our Suzuki Livestock Company. With the flow of people, many companies officially started marketing their beef fairs. In this era, advertising had always been very important. The sales volume of a product was directly proportional to the packaging and publicity. It was precisely because of this that the production value of the product was not the biggest part of the output of the big companies. The real cost was the cost of publicity. For example, if a movie had a total budget of 100 million yuan, 30 million yuan would be used to pay the actors, 20 million yuan would be used to shoot the movie, and 50 million yuan would be used to promote the movie. Although livestock companies did not burn as much money as movie promotions, they still spent a lot of money. Originally, when Jiang Hai went to see the beef fairs in Massachusetts, he did not feel anything. But now it was completely different. With the flow of people entering this area, the major companies also launched different activities. Basically, there were three major activities: balloons, banners, and beautiful women. These were the essential elements. At the same time, some of the larger companies would hang a lot of TVs there. They introduced their farms, their companies, their cattle farming, and their business philosophy in all aspects. There were also some developers who specially looked for gaming companies to make some simple games. Not only could they use the app to play it on their mobile phones, but they could also queue up to play it on their Xbox. It was a simulation of how they grew up as a calf. Of course, the most eye-catching thing was not these patterns, but the row of plainly dressed beauties standing at the entrance of almost all the exhibition halls. These beauties basically only wore clothes that could cover the important parts of their bodies. On their heads they either wore a pair of horns or a cowboy hat. They were dressed in Western cowboy style, cute little cow style, and cute pink style. There were all kinds of beautiful women. There were European, American, Latin American, and Asian beauties. Although it was April in New York and it wasn't time for them to wear this outfit, they still worked hard for their jobs. These girls were either dancing on the booths, handing out flyers to the tourists below, or doing some specific actions in some corners to attract the tourists to their shops. Look at them. Is this what you call an exhibition? Luo Binsi, what do we mean by this? Looking at the girls in front of him, Jiang Hai's eyes never left their long legs and ample bosoms. His eyes were not idle and his mouth was not idle either. He couldn't help but say to Robbins, this guy was too unreliable, and he actually felt a little embarrassed. Compared to the other booths, Jiang Hai's booth was a little, The location of Jiang Hai's booth was very good. After all, there were only 15 cows in the exhibition hall and it cost $1 million for 3 days. This location was not the best in this exhibition, but it could be ranked in the top 5. This proved that Jiang Hai was not short of money. But to be honest, even the booths that only cost $100,000 were much more lively than Jiang Hai's booth. At Jiang Hai's place there were no beautiful women, no banners, no TV, and no advertising. Not to mention there were no games. There were only 4 men sitting at the entrance, and behind them were 15 cows looking around in a daze. Boss, I don't think we need those fancy things. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Robbins was a little embarrassed. It was not that he didn't think of it, nor was it that he wanted to save money for Jiang Hai. It was because he really didn't have the experience. In the past, he had participated in the New York exhibition, but that was nearly 10 years ago. At that time, people didn't have so many tricks. Most importantly, he was the person in charge of the cattle. The number of cattle that could be placed in the exhibition hall was about 20 to 30, but there were hundreds of cattle that were transported to the exhibition hall. The rest of the cows naturally needed someone to look after them. Robbins, the head cowboy, was the one who looked after the cows in the barn. So, at most, he had heard about the situation here, but he had never been here. As for Bell Lester, well, you couldn't count on him to be here, right? After all, he was still a newbie. Without advertising and TV, it was difficult to keep the eyes and footsteps of the people around him. Some people were interested in Jiang Hai's exhibition hall. They poked their heads in to take a look, then walked out. Because Jiang Hai didn't even have someone to introduce him to. As the boss, Jiang Hai naturally couldn't introduce him. Besides, he didn't know how to do it. Cici was a fisherman, so he didn't know how to do it. Bell was good with guns, but he couldn't talk. Robbins knew these cows the best, but according to Jiang Hai's understanding of this guy, if he wanted to ask for a job, he had to eat for a long time. He even had to treat Jiang Hai to a meal before he dared to test him. It would be strange if this guy would introduce him. So, even if there were occasionally people who came, they would just take a look outside and leave. These people were basically employees of small supermarkets or non-chain restaurants. They didn't have the eyesight to see the quality of these unslaughtered cows. Looking at the deserted Jiang Hai, the group of people from the Cartwright Company couldn't help but laugh. Pathetic nouveau riche country bumpkin. Especially the guy who was forced by Jiang Hai to bet 10 million, but in the end he couldn't help but sneer. Even Paul K., who was behind him, who made the 1 million bet with Jiang Hai, couldn't help but wipe his sweat. It seemed that Jiang Hai was just pretending to be tough. With this pathetic popularity, he wanted to win against them? Nonsense. Now Jiang Hai's perception was much stronger than before. He naturally saw through these people's gazes, but he didn't say anything. There was nothing to say. If you asked him to pull down his face to attract customers, he would really be too lazy to do so. However, he was still a little reluctant to watch his $1 million go down the drain. It was really depressing. Oh, your place is really deserted. Just as Jiang Hai was thinking about whether he should go out to find the girl to come back and make the announcement, suddenly a voice came in from the door. Jiang Hai looked up. Oh, an acquaintance. It was the old man from the supermarket in Boston. With him, there was also the middle-aged man who had met Jiang Hai once. Beside him was a woman who looked to be in her 40s, and behind them was a girl who looked a little timid. Hey, uncle, why are you here? Looking at the old man, Jiang Hai couldn't help but say happily. Our family also runs a supermarket. Why can't I come? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the old man was not polite. He walked straight into Jiang Hai's exhibition hall and found a seat to sit down. Seeing that his father had come, the family of 3 behind him, who didn't seem to want to come in, had to come in. Robin still had some eyesight and immediately brought chairs for them to sit down. You didn't say that you wanted to come, so let's come together. Seeing the old man sitting opposite him, Jiang Hai couldn't help but say. You didn't ask, haha, I have to say, your place is really deserted. Smiling at Jiang Hai, the old man couldn't help but say. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai also smiled awkwardly. I'm here for the first time, so I don't know. My cowboys don't have these tricks up their sleeves. Hey, it looks like there won't be any improvement today. Hearing the old man's words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smile and mutter. You really have too much money and nowhere to spend it? The location of your exhibition hall is very good. It costs about $1 million. You didn't even do your homework before coming here. Don't tell me you don't even know what to do in these 3 days. Looking at Jiang Hai, the old man asked with some surprise. I know this. Although Jiang Hai didn't prepare any publicity, at least he still looked at the process of the exhibition. This Eastern beef cattle exhibition was mainly for 3 days. In these 3 days, in addition to promoting their beef cattle, dairy cows and agricultural products, there would also be a selection, the selection of the Beef King. On the first day of the exhibition, it was mainly tourists who came here to visit, or purchasers who came here to look and then vote. Each exhibition hall had 15 numbers, 1 number corresponding to a cow. Otherwise, why do you think Jiang Hai brought 15 cows? These cows had their own numbers in the central system of the main control room. If the tourists felt that a cow was better, they would vote for that cow. Each person was limited to 1 vote. At the end of the day, the 16 cows with the highest number of votes would enter this year's Eastern Beef King semi-finals. On the second day, it was the PK battle. From the appearance, to the color of the hair, to the body shape, that was to say, judging whether a cow was good or not. 8 out of the 16 cows would enter the finals on the third day. The finals were much more serious, because these 8 cows would be slaughtered on the spot. After all, this was a beef cattle exhibition, not some horsemanship or dog show. The beef cattle here not only had to have a beautiful body shape, but also had to have good meat. The amount of meat produced, the amount of meat, and the probability of marbling appeared were all the criteria for judging. However, even if they won the Beef King, it would be the honor of the cow's owner because the cow was already dead. Chapter 233. The quality of your cattle is good, but if you don't have popularity, you can't even pass the first round. How can you be the king of cattle? Looking at Jiang Hai, the old man said with a smile on his face. Looking at his wretched smile, Jiang Hai couldn't help but be stunned. Then what should I do now? Although when Jiang Hai came here he had some understanding of the rules here, but his understanding wasn't very clear. He originally thought that all the cows would be taken out for the exhibition, and then the audience and tourists would be able to score them. Now it seems that he was thinking too much. If he can't even qualify for the first day of the competition, then what's the point of the rest? Although it wasn't that Jiang Hai couldn't afford to lose $1 million, it would be too embarrassing. What else can we do? But boy, I have to say that the quality of your cattle is really good. How much are you selling your cattle for? Hearing Jiang Hai's speechless words, the old man couldn't help but smile and say. Jiang Hai was speechless. Of course it's good cattle. It's not that I want to say this, but every cow I have here can be butchered into marbled meat. The other meat is also specially selected. The tendon meat of my cattle is not worse than the eye meat and the upper brain of the average cattle. Speaking of his cattle, Jiang Hai was still very confident and looked at the old man with a serious face and said. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the old man couldn't help but be stunned. As for the old man's son, daughter-in-law, and granddaughter, they were a little confused when they heard Jiang Hai's words. If you don't brag, we will still be good friends. Looking at Jiang Hai, the old man said with a serious face. What are you bragging about? You don't believe me. No matter what, my cattle will be butchered in 3 days. You will know then. Looking at the old man in front of him who didn't believe him, Jiang Hai couldn't help but be a little speechless. Hey, if your cattle are like what you said, then your cattle are all treasures. According to the calculation that a cow can be butchered into 5% of the best grade A beef, then your cattle here are worth 100,000. 15 cows, that's more than 5 million. TSK, that's right. If you didn't have such confidence, you wouldn't have spent more than $1 million to rent this place. Looking at Jiang Hai, the old man here was a little convinced. Although he didn't spend much time with Jiang Hai, he still has some understanding. But he still had some understanding of Jiang Hai's character. At least he wasn't likely to run his mouth. If what Jiang Hai said was true, then Jiang Hai's net worth was unimaginable. This was because he knew that Jiang Hai didn't only have 15 cows, he had nearly 20,000 of them. If a cow is worth $100,000, 20,000 cows is $2 billion, which is comparable to the total assets of a medium-sized company. This is only the amount for 1 year. What if it's 10 years, 20 years? 2 billion will become 20 billion and then 40 billion. It seems that if this snowball continues, then it's only a matter of time before Jiang Hai becomes the richest man in the world. It's good that you believe me. Hearing the old man's words, Jiang Hai's eyes were brimming with tears. In fact, if someone pointed at a cow and told Jiang Hai that his cow was worth nearly $700,000, Jiang Hai would spit on his face and say that he's crazy about money. But when it comes to Jiang Hai, he really doesn't know what to say. I'll do my part. Which one of these cows do you think is the best? Seeing Jiang Hai's helpless look, the old man said with a serious face, and then pointed at the cows behind him. That's up to you. These cows were randomly picked from my manor. There's no obvious difference. At most, they were raised separately for about a week. Basically, they're all the same. I feel that every one of them has the potential to be the champion. Indeed, Jiang Hai's words were not groundless. His cows are all very good looking. Their bones are strong, their hair is soft and beautiful, and their eyes are bright. They look very intelligent. There's almost no fat on their bodies. The whole cow is not only intelligent but also very strong and sturdy. If they were taken to other places, they would be raised as seeds. But in Jiang Hai's manor, they are almost exactly the same. This is not good news. Because people rarely remember the things of the previous family and compare them with the things of this family. They would compare horizontally. In their eyes, Jiang Hai's cows are all the same, which means that Jiang Hai's cows are all the same. After the old man glanced at Jiang Hai's cows, he secretly nodded. Although he is not an expert, he is half an expert. Then I'll choose this one. This one looks more energetic. In the end, the old man chose Jiang Hai's third cow. The first person to enter the venue will have the right to vote. Immediately, the old man's son took out the app and entered their choice according to the number on the ballot. Soon Jiang Hai's cow went from 0 votes to 4 votes. Jiang Hai also took a look at it, but it's better not to look at it. Because at this time the first cow has more than 2,000 votes. It's from Suzuki Dawai Livestock Company. Sigh, the gap is really big, but I have to thank you, old man. If it weren't for you, I might not even have 4 votes. Looking at the numbers in front of him, Jiang Hai sighed. Currently, the #1 company on the web is the Suzuki Daiwa Livestock Company of Japan. although the United States has a strong sense of national pride and xenophobia. But he has to admit that Japan's Wagyu is the #1 cow in the beef industry. As the emperor of the beef industry, Japan's Wagyu has always stood at the top of the beef industry. In the past, the United States used to exert pressure on Japan through the government. However, in the face of pressure from their godfather, the United States, at that time, Japan firmly rejected these people. As the only beef cow in the world that had a 100% chance of producing marble veins, Wagyu was a 5A level existence. It had always been the strongest existence. Therefore, even if it was a beef show held in the United States, as long as a large Japanese livestock company came, it would definitely be able to enter the top 3. This was the position of Wagyu in the hearts of the people of the United States, and also in the hearts of the people of the world. Just like now, the first place is Wagyu, followed by Jianghai's old rival, Starlit Company. The third place is a livestock company called Duruf Company, which got more than 300 votes. The second and third place votes added together are not as many as the first place votes. This also shows the strength of Japan's beef. Of course, if it's according to the national nature, then Japan's Wagyu is far behind. You have to pay attention to this Suzuki company. This is the third time they have participated in the New York Beef Show in the past 10 years. Before this, they won the title of King of Beef. Their company is not a small company in Japan. The probability of their beef having marble veins is also quite high. It's not easy to beat them. Looking at Jianghai's phone, the old man smiled and patted Jianghai's shoulder. He said with a serious expression, "Thank you, old man. This time I will give you some beef." Hearing the old man's words, Jianghai also reacted. Originally, he thought that as long as he has marble veins he should be able to kill these beef cattle in seconds, but now it seems that there are still some strong enemies. It seems that the marble veins are not foolproof. He may have to work harder. Give it to me, but if you can sell it to me, that would be great. Hearing Jianghai's words, the old man said with a smile, but hearing his words, Jianghai was a little confused. What do you want beef for? In Jianghai's view, the old man only has a small supermarket. If he wants to eat, he can just give him some. What does he want these for? At first it was to sell, but I didn't expect that the boss of the Sea Commerce Group would also come to the beef show in person. Just when Jianghai was puzzled at this time, a woman's voice came from a distance. In the eyes of Jianghai and the others, a very arrogant woman walked in from outside. This woman's face was very delicate. She looked about 30 years old. She was wearing a black striped woman's suit, a pair of high heels on her feet, and her long blonde hair was tied up high behind her head. Behind her, there were more than a dozen people, but some of them were recording something, and some of them were bodyguards, wearing sunglasses and standing beside her expressionlessly. When Jianghai saw this person, he was stunned for a moment, because he seemed to have seen this person before. But at that time, this person seemed to be wearing an evening dress, and her aura was very similar to now, but also completely different. On the other hand, Jianghai was wearing an outdoor sportswear at that time, and now he was also wearing an outdoor sportswear. But what does this woman mean at this time? What the hell is that Sea Commerce supermarket? Mr. Zhang, I don't know if you still recognize me? Looking at the old man who turned around, the woman said slowly, "Prawalton, how can I not recognize you? How is your father?" Hearing this woman's words, the old man said with a smile. At this time, the smile on his face was almost the same as when he was talking to Jianghai, but if you look carefully, you will find that the aura on his body at this time is completely different from before. "My father is fine, thank you for your concern." This woman named Prawalton, in front of the old man, did not retreat because of the aura. Instead, she opened her mouth and said to the old man in Wuxia language, which was not very proficient. Listening to this foreign woman, Jianghai couldn't help but laugh, but he didn't say anything. This woman is really funny. In the past, it was very interesting to hear foreigners speak Chinese, and now it seems to be true. But compared to Jianghai, some people around him were not surprised. Even the middle-aged man next to the old man nodded. Chapter 234. Hearing the woman's words, the old man chuckled and waved his hand indifferently. "Well, I have seen everything here. Then I will go first. This is my business card. Remember that you promised me that you would sell me beef afterward. Also, I have already taken care of the food and wine. Don't forget what I want." Patting Jianghai on the shoulder, the old man walked away with a smile. After the old man left, Jianghai also looked at the business card the old man gave him for the first time. He only saw a name and a string of phone number printed on it. The name is Zhang Dihai. The phone number is not the phone number in the store he is familiar with, but a private phone number. Before Jiang Hai could react, the old man had already left. As for the woman, she came in with her people. I didn't expect that we would meet again. I remember that I gave you my phone number, but why didn't you call me? Walking into the room, the woman named Prawalton raised her head and said proudly, "Oh, I thought you were just being polite at that time, and I didn't think that you would really buy beef." Looking at Prawalton in front of him, Jiang Hai also put away the business card given by old Zhang. "You really don't know me?" Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the woman who was still a queen was slightly surprised. Should I know you?" Seeing this person's appearance, Jiang Hai asked carefully. He really didn't know her. In fact, not only did Jiang Hai not know her, but the three people around him also didn't know her, otherwise they would have reminded Jiang Hai. "Interesting. Whether you use such a trick to let me know you again, I have to admit that you succeeded. Your acting skills are really good. Then I will introduce myself again. My name is Prawalton, and I am now the general manager of Sam's Club." Looking at Jiang Hai, Prawalton said with a serious face, "Oh, hello, Ms. Walton." However, listening to her introduction, Jiang Hai was still very confused. He didn't know what Sam's Club was. Why did he feel that this guy was so proud when he talked about it? He had never heard of it before. "Oh, well, let's talk business. Although you don't know me, I find that your bulls are quite interesting." Walking into Jiang Hai's exhibition hall, Prawalton said while walking. It seemed that Jiang Hai didn't know her, which really made her feel a little awkward. She hadn't felt this way for many years. Basically, wherever she went in the past, she was the most popular and sought-after person. People like Jiang Hai were really rare. My bulls here are not bragging. The quality is definitely the best here, and I can guarantee that each of them can be killed with the most beautiful marble grain. The total output of premium grade A snow frost beef will not be less than 5%, and the bulls here are not specially selected. The bulls in my manor are basically like this. Hearing Prawalton change the topic to bulls, Jiang Hai also said with a serious face. He was really confident in his bulls. It can be seen that these red flowers here don't have green leaves to go with them. They are indeed a little monotonous. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, others may not believe it, but Prawalton seemed to believe it. It's my first time participating, so I don't have much experience." Listening to Prawalton's words, Jiang Hai explained again awkwardly. "Your place is really interesting. We can also help you, but I hope that you can sell your beef to us." Looking at Jiang Hai in front of her, Prawalton looked at Jiang Hai with a serious face and said, "This is no problem, I also came here to sell these beef cattle." Hearing that she also intended to buy beef, Jiang Hai was not as surprised as he was to Mr. Zhang, because this woman looked at the ostentation. She shouldn't be buying it to eat. Jiang Hai also came here to do business. It is naturally excellent to be able to open a market. We want all the sales rights. But hearing Jiang Hai's words, the woman turned her head and said with a serious face, "This may not work because I have already promised Mr. Zhang. If he wants to buy, I will definitely let him buy enough." Shaking his head, Jiang Hai rejected Prawalton's proposal. The reason why he said this was because he really promised Mr. Zhang, and also because he can't put all his eggs in 3 baskets. This is not his style. "Interesting little boy, this is my business card, remember what you promised me." Looking at Jiang Hai in front of her, Prawalton couldn't help but smile. Then she handed Jiang Hai a business card. This business card was almost the same as Mr. Zhang's. A whiteboard business card with only a string of English name, Prawalton, and a line of phone number below. After giving Jiang Hai her business card, the woman waved her hand to the people around her. Then she cast her vote on the cow that old Zhang and the others had voted for. In an instant, Jiang Hai's votes had almost reached 20. The ranking also went from the original nowhere to the top 300 in an instant. Although it is a qualitative leap, the top 300. What's the use? Thank you. Although these votes are just a drop in the bucket, Jiang Hai still nodded seriously. Although your cow is good, if it continues like this, it will be difficult for you to enter the semi-finals by the end of today, so you have to think of a way. Seeing Jiang Hai thanking her, Prawalton, who had already walked to the door, stopped and said to Jiang Hai without looking back, "But it's too late for me to find someone to make those things now." Hearing her words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but sigh. Buying some TVs is easy, buying some Xbox is also easy, but the problem is that he doesn't have an app now and he doesn't shoot videos. These all take time. It also takes time to make those banners and balloons. It may not take much time to find those girls, but don't forget their clothes are also custom made. This also takes time. These big companies may have been preparing for a few months before the exhibition began. Now they want Jiang Hai to make a last-minute effort. Is this a joke? Therefore, other than feeling depressed, he had nothing else to say. Doing these conventional things, I guess you have no chance to win the competition, but recently Selena Gomez happened to be in New York. She is creating new music for her band with DJ Zed. If you want to turn the tables, maybe you can go to her. Looking at Jiang Hai's helpless face behind her, Prawalton said indifferently. But I'm not familiar with her. Thinking about it carefully, to be honest, Jiang Hai has almost forgotten what Selena Gomez looks like. He only remembers that the girl's height is neither tall nor short. In the eyes of the United States, she is indeed not tall. He can't remember what she looks like. He vaguely remembers that she has a square face. A square face. It always feels weird to say that a girl has a square face. Other than that, Jiang Hai really doesn't have any impression. You are not familiar with her. Will she introduce you to me? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Prawalton asked with some surprise. I'm really not familiar with her. Jiang Hai recalled that the reason why the girl introduced him to this woman at the cocktail party that day seemed to be because of his relationship with Justin Bieber. He really doesn't know anything else. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Prawalton couldn't help but whisper, "You are really a strange person?" Then she turned and left. For her, a person who owns a manor and sells cattle seems to have a lot of money, but he doesn't know her. He made friends with Selena Gomez, but he doesn't seem to know her. He didn't even call her, but he seems to have a close relationship with Zhang Dihai of the Sea Commerce Group. Jiang Hai is now a big question mark in Prawalton's eyes. Am I strange? After watching Prawalton leave, Jiang Hai also turned his head and looked at Robbins and asked. Sometimes it's a bit. After thinking about it, Robbins nodded in agreement, and then the three of them couldn't help but laugh. Jiang Hai couldn't help but laugh. He is such a casual person. He is weak in ambition. He is the kind of person who will never sit if he can lie down. He will never stand if he can sit. It is also a burden for him to think too much. Boss, the quality of the beef cattle in this exhibition hall is surprisingly good. Although I don't know if it is true that all the beef cattle in his manor have marbled patterns, the probability of the beef here having marbled patterns is very high. It is at least A4 level or above. Regardless of Jiang Hai and others in the exhibition hall, after Prawalton walked out of Jiang Hai's exhibition hall, a middle-aged man beside her walked to her side and whispered. This middle-aged man is the chief appraiser of Sam's Club. His vision is even sharper than the judges of this competition. For Jiang Hai's cattle, he believes that he will never be wrong. He doesn't know if all the cattle in Jiang Hai's manor have such quality, but at least his 15 cattle are of the best quality. I know, so I want to let him enter the finals. I want to see how good the quality of his beef cattle is. Squinting her eyes and listening to the analysis of her subordinates, Prawalton's face couldn't help but have a smile. She took the phone from her assistant's hand and dialed a familiar number. Hello, Sister Prawalton, what's the matter? The phone rang for about a dozen times before a woman hurriedly picked it up and shouted at the other side of the phone. On the other side of the phone, there was loud music that was constantly reverberating. This kind of sound was most likely to come from a nightclub. However, it was still morning and there were no nightclubs open yet. Hello, sister, there is a fun thing, maybe you will be interested in it. Hearing the voice on the phone, Prawalton also said lightly, but when she said it, her eyes flashed with an inexplicable light. Chapter 235. Boss, the first place winner has more than 5,000 votes, and the 16th place winner has 327 votes. Sitting in the middle of the exhibition hall, Belle Lester looked at his phone helplessly and said speechlessly. Boss, it looks like we're going to lose, Eleanor Cece couldn't help but whisper. While whispering, she also looked at Jiang Hai and Robbins. Jiang Hai was fine at this time, but Robin's face was a little ugly. After all, this beef show was their first shot at the farm's beef cattle. If this shot didn't work, it would have a huge impact on their future sales. As the leader of the farm's cowboys, he thought that this was his responsibility. Sigh, if it's not meant to be, don't force it. You won't understand even if I tell you. This is fate, you have to accept it. Well, it's almost noon. What do you want to eat? I'll buy it for you. Jiang Hai was actually a little depressed at this time. In the blink of an eye, a few hours had passed. In addition to Mr. Zhang's family, Prawalton, and her dozen men who voted for nearly 20 votes, only some passers-by came in recently to vote. At present, Jiang Hai's cow had the most votes, only 31 votes, ranking 293rd. In addition to this cow, only 3 other cows had votes. They were 3 votes, 2 votes, and 2 votes. There were 11 cows that didn't even have votes. Jiang Hai was also very speechless. He wasn't distressed about renting this place for $1 million, nor was he distressed about losing $1 million. Although $2 million wasn't a small sum, it wasn't something Jiang He couldn't afford right now. However, if he lost it for no reason, he wouldn't be happy either. But what could he do now? He couldn't forcibly pull these people into his exhibition hall. Even if he pulled them in, they might not vote. It was too late to do anything else now. Of course, he knew that he couldn't just rely on them like this, but he did think of a lot of ways. Even if he directly killed a cow here to attract people's attention, that would be enough. But the problem now was that he couldn't kill a cow here. Killing a cow in the United States was also something to be careful about. Otherwise, the Animal Protection Association would come looking for trouble. Jiang Hai didn't want to be accused of killing animals on the street. Even in the finals, the cows were killed in a special slaughterhouse in the venue. The whole process was supervised by the staff in the exhibition hall and the venue staff to prevent any possibility of fake meat. Then the dead cows were transported, skinned, and bled to the front to be dissected. This was also for the sake of fairness, justice, and publicity. However, from the looks of it, Jiang Hai had no chance to participate in the finals. At least for now, he couldn't even enter the next stage. It was good to be awesome, but first, there was no comparison, and second, there was no publicity. After all, there were very few experts here. Without these things, how could they stop the most important voters and tourists from leaving? AI boss, how can you still eat at this time? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Luo Binsi sighed helplessly and spoke to Jiang Hai with a hoarse voice. Obviously, he was the most stressed and angry because the beef couldn't be sold. Why can't I eat? People are iron and rice is steel. If I don't eat, I will be hungry. I see a lot of snacks there. Since you don't want to say anything, I will go and buy them. Hearing these people's words, Jiang Hai also knew that they were really not interested in eating now, but Jiang Hai still had to buy them. So, he patted the dust on his butt and Jiang Hai walked out of the exit against the flow of people. Just when Jiang Hai just left, a group of people also walked in from outside. After looking outside the exhibition hall, a girl walked into the exhibition hall first. Excuse me, is there a Wuxia person named Jiang Hai here? Looking at the three people in the room, the girl smiled and asked the three people. Hearing the girl's words, Luo Binsi and Cici were still a little confused, but Belle Lester had already jumped up. Belle didn't seem to love anything except guns. But after all, he was a young man and he still recognized the girl in front of him. You are? Belle pointed at the girl and said with some surprise. Hello, I am Jiang Hai's friend. I heard that he had some trouble here, so I came to help. Hearing Belle's excited words, the girl couldn't help but smile sweetly, then said with a serious face, there is a lot of delicious food here. At this time, Jiang Hai didn't know the situation in the exhibition hall. He had already walked out of the exhibition hall. Just like in China where there were people, there would be some merchants who would come to set up stalls. It was the same for the American vendors. Of course, compared to the pressure of life, most of the snacks sold in the United States were sold by Latin Americans, African Americans, Asians, and Middle Easterners. They were selling these snacks to survive. On the other hand, some Caucasians were selling these snacks to earn some extra money. Some of them were selling these snacks just for the experience and to be praised by others. Sometimes Caucasians think differently. Today was the opening day of the beef exhibition, so naturally there were a lot of delicious food here. When Jiang Hai came, he saw a lot of people setting up stalls here. Now that he came out, there were even more people here. Looking from afar, there were at least 20 or 30 stalls, and there were a lot of people in front of each stall. There was a wide variety of things being sold. The most fragrant was naturally the Arabian barbecue. Those people of Middle Eastern descent were indeed very knowledgeable about barbecue. They also knew how to barbecue ordinary barbecue, how to barbecue it well, and how to barbecue it so that it was crispy on the outside and tender on the inside. This was a skill that had been passed down for many years. In addition to the barbecue that attracted Jiang Hai the most, there were also many snacks such as cheese sandwiches, hot dogs, hamburgers, fried chicken, and so on. There was also a snack from Maine, lobster rolls. That was to say, the whole lobster meat was sandwiched in bread with butter and lemon. After roasting it in the oven, it tasted pretty good. In addition to this, the most popular one should be the Mexican tortilla. This thing was very dazzling everywhere. In addition to the above few mainstream snacks, there were many less mainstream ones such as the Spring Festival rolls in Brooklyn, Bolivian snacks, bread, donuts, and even pizza. They sold them on the spot, but it took a long time. Although Jiang Hai liked to eat pizza, it didn't mean that he could wait for a long time, so he quickly decided to buy barbecue and hamburgers. They were a little tired of eating lobster rolls when they were in the fishery. Compared to lobster rolls, the newly made hamburgers were something they liked very much. Not long after, Jiang Hai carried a few big bags in his hand, which were filled with 50 large beef skewers. These people from the Middle East were still very particular. The meat on the skewers were large pieces of meat. A beef skewer was about 2 ounces, and these 50 skewers weighed about 10 pounds. The other bags were filled with hamburgers, sandwiches, hot dogs, and so on. Carrying a few big bags, Jiang Hai squeezed into the exhibition hall. But as soon as he walked in, he heard music from a distance. This sound should belong to the category of rock, but it wasn't a very rough rock. Instead, it felt like an orchestra and the music was a little playful. The next song is a slower one for everyone. Just as Jiang Hai was wondering who was singing here, a slightly familiar voice came into his ears. As Jiang Hai looked forward, he saw a girl in casual clothes, standing in the middle of the venue with a microphone, slowly twisting to the music while singing a nice ballad. This seems to be my exhibition hall. Looking at the girl, the band behind the girl, and the exhibition hall behind the band, Jiang Hai couldn't help but be a little confused. With his powerful strength, he forced his way through the crowd and walked into the exhibition hall. When Jiang Hai walked in with things, the girl who was singing also saw Jiang Hai and winked at Jiang Hai. This made Jiang Hai completely confused. What the hell is this, boss? At this time, Luo Binci and the others also walked over with smiles on their faces and looked at Jiang Hai with joy. What's the situation? Jiang Hai asked with some confusion as he handed the food to the three of them. Boss, you are really resourceful. It turns out that you already have a backup plan. You even invited Selena Gomez. God, her specialty album was one of the best-selling specialty albums 2 years ago. She even got first place. How do you know her? Jiang Hai was puzzled, but in fact his 3 men were even more puzzled, especially Belle Lester, who looked at Jiang Hai with excitement and asked. Soldiers have a paranoid love for female singers. The most powerful country in this regard is Korea. The soldiers of Korea love female groups. It can be said that gongs and drums are loud, firecrackers are fired, and red flags are fluttering. There is a sea of people, especially sexy female celebrities. They are naturally very popular there. In the United States, although it is not as explicit as in Korea, they are also quite interested in the love of beautiful women. Although Selena Gomez is not the most popular in the army, she can still be ranked in the top 10. After all, she is also a very popular female celebrity in the United States recently. She debuted in acting and singing is not very good. The most important thing is that she is very in line with the aesthetic view of the United States, so her popularity has always been high in the United States. I don't seem to be very familiar with her. Looking at the girl standing outside singing, Jiang Hai said a little awkwardly. Chapter 236. The beef cows in this exhibition hall are from my friend's manor. Please support him, thank you. As another song ended, Selena Gomez's voice came from outside. Then several people behind her also packed up their instruments and walked into the exhibition hall with her. As soon as they walked in, Jiang Hai greeted them and looked at her with a little embarrassment. It's really troublesome. Have some drinks. Looking at Selena Gomez, Jiang Hai said with some embarrassment. Hey, it's okay. We are friends. You helped me before. Don't you remember? Taking the drink handed over by Jiang Hai, Selena smiled, then unscrewed the bottle cap and took a sip. She was a little tired after singing a few songs just now. Hee. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai was even more embarrassed. The two of them didn't even have a phone call and only met once. Can they be called friends? You must be kidding. But at this time, because Selena's song just now attracted a large number of people, although many people left after Selena left, there were still many people who came in. Although they were curious about the relationship between their boss and Selena Gomez, Robin still remembered their task and immediately greeted them and introduced their cows to these people. However, it was also because of their relationship that these people who entered the exhibition hall had no time to harass Selena Gomez for the time being. Selena Gomez also looked at Jiang Hai and said, By the way, I think your location is good. Why are there so few people? Because I didn't prepare anything. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai said with some helplessness. I didn't expect you to be a rich man. By the way, let me introduce you. This is Zetter DJ Zetter. He is very famous in the United States. The songs he produced and wrote have reached the top in the 26 countries. He is also the producer of my recent album. Feeling Jiang Hai's embarrassment, after all, Selena Gomez is not very familiar with Jiang Hai. The reason why she chose to come and help was because of Prawalton's request, and also because she said that she owed Jiang Hai a favor. After all, Jiang Hai helped her, but later she introduced Jiang Hai and Prawalton to each other. Originally, she wanted to help Jiang Hai open the market, But now it seems that this Jiang Hai is either overconfident or has insufficient social experience. Third, they were a little tired from practicing, so they came here to take a look. Hello. Hearing Selina's words, Jiang Hai also stretched out his hand and shook this handsome man's hand. Hello. Seeing Jiang Hai's hand stretched out, Zetter, who didn't want to pay attention to Jiang Hai, had to shake hands with Jiang Hai. Although their personalities are a little strange when it comes to music, they are strange, not stupid. It's not worthwhile to make things difficult for Jiang Hai. Of course, it's inevitable that he doesn't like Jiang Hai. There are two reasons for this. First, this person is originally a mix of Soviet Russia and German. And whether it's Soviet Russia or German, they are not very friendly to Wuxia and Wuxia people. Second, it's obvious that this guy is interested in Selena Gomez, and Jiang Hai is his imaginary love rival. After all, in his opinion, the United States is a slightly fickle and unloyal society. If someone can take the initiative to sing for you, it's only possible if they have a close relationship. He's been working with Selena for 2 months now. Let alone asking her for help. Even if he wants to treat her to a meal, he has never treated her to a meal alone. Every time he brings the whole orchestra, which makes him very unhappy with Jiang Hai. Therefore, after shaking hands with Jiang Hai, he didn't talk to Jiang Hai anymore. Jiang Hai also felt it, so he just talked to Selena. Selena actually doesn't know much about Jiang Hai. Other than asking about his recent situation, she also talked about the beef cattle show. After a while, they didn't have any common topics. Fortunately, soon Belle Lester came over excitedly. Boss, we're in the top 16. Belle Lester excitedly showed his phone to Jiang Hai. Although there were more beautiful women outside, although there were games, TV, balloons, banners, and even free drinks outside, but there was still a celebrity and an A-list, quasi-A-list celebrity. The effect was really good. Not long after, Jiang Hai's 15 cows all had their votes. The one with the most votes is the one chosen by Mr. Zhang and Prawalton. The number of votes has reached 736, and it's still increasing rapidly. Unknowingly, it has rushed into the top 16 and is moving towards the top 10. As for the remaining cows, although they weren't as tall, they were still increasing rapidly. Originally, these people didn't come to Jiang Hai's place, so they didn't know what kind of cows Jiang Hai had. But now that they looked at it, it really was different. In addition to the smell of grass, Jiang Hai's cows also have some cow odor, but the odor is very light. If you don't walk very close to it, you can't smell it. This is what Jiang Hai discovered recently. Perhaps it was due to the improvement of the pasture. The stench from the cows was basically eliminated. As long as they stayed in a well-ventilated place and didn't let the farts gather in this small space, the smell of the cowshed would still be there, but it was very light. It's a level that is acceptable even if you don't wear a mask. Moreover, the cows are also very strong. They're almost the same. At a glance, there are no outstanding points. But if you look carefully, every cow is a highlight. Although most of these people who come to the beef cattle exhibition are laymen, they have some knowledge. However, they still had some knowledge in this area. Although their eyes were not as sharp as those of experts, they could still distinguish between good and bad. At least in their opinion, Jiang Hai's cow was much better than the Cartwright Company's cow. Manager, that guy's cow has entered the top 16. There is always a limit to the number of visitors. Jiang Hai's exhibition hall is popular, so naturally it snatches a lot of visitors who originally belonged to the Cartwright Company. Looking at Jiang Hai's exhibition hall with people coming in and out from time to time, Paul K. can't help but go to the young man who was beaten up by Jiang Hai that day and whispered to him. Despicable guy. I didn't expect him to know Selena Gomez. I underestimated him. I thought that a newbie like him wouldn't be able to do anything. Now it seems like he's really a ferocious dragon. Narrowing his eyes, the manager here muttered softly. Hearing his words, Paul K. and the others beside him stopped talking. Actually, it doesn't matter if he enters the semi-finals. Although he has 20,000 cows, he only has 20,000 cows. Don't forget that our cows are the best selected from 2 million cows. The base is different, so naturally the impact will be different. I think he can still be happy for a few more days. After a while, the young man let out a long sigh. He knows that his mentality has been unknowingly affected by Jiang Hai. This is very wrong for him. So he calmed himself down and said slowly. Then he stood up and walked to the back of the exhibition hall. He still needs to keep an eye on things. Less than half an hour after he left, Selena Gomez and the others also left. After all, Selena was just here to have fun. She didn't know much about beef cows. Although she was willing to eat special grade A beef, she didn't know how to raise cows. Besides, she didn't know much about Jiang Hai. So after she didn't have much to talk with Jiang Hai, under the persuasion of the person named Zay, they were ready to go back and continue their training. Of course, before they left, the two of them couldn't help but exchange phone numbers. This time Jiang Hai was really grateful to her. He told her that if she had time, she must go to his manor in Boston to have fun. He really had enough special grade A beef. Perhaps before she saw Jiang Hai's cows, she would have thought that Jiang Hai was just bullshitting. But now, it seemed that Jiang Hai really had such an ability, so she happily agreed. After Selena left, the number of visitors in Jiang Hai's exhibition hall decreased by more than half in an instant. But it didn't matter. With the popularity just now, Jiang Hai's cows' votes were increasing rapidly. Jiang Hai was quite confident in his cows. His only worry was that they couldn't pass the first day. As long as they passed the first day and entered the second day, which had nothing to do with popularity, then Jiang Hai's confidence, which could be said to be the confidence of his cows, would all rise. As time went by, Jiang Hai and the others gradually calmed down. It seemed that God was really good to them. At 5 o'clock in the afternoon, the selection time for the day officially ended. After the last group of tourists left, Jiang Hai and the others gradually calmed down. On the official website of the New York Beef Show, the beef cows that would enter the semifinals tomorrow were ranked. Ranked first, of course, was the 5A beef cow of the Suzuki Group, which had a total of 17,556 votes. Ranked second was Jiang Hai's old rival, a Belgian blue cow of the Starlit company. But all the experts knew that the reason why this Belgian blue cow was ranked second, with a total of 9,788 votes, was mainly because its muscles were really developed. Its muscles were like those of a bodybuilder, which was really eye-catching. But the so-called marble pattern, the white inside, was the fat, so the blue cow's muscles were too dense. Although it was popular, it probably wouldn't have a good effect. The third was an Angus cow of the Truman Company, and the fourth was an Angus cow of the Starlit Company. The fifth was a Charolais cow of the Boveda Company, and the sixth was a 5A Wagyu cow of the Suzuki Company, but it wasn't very strong. It seemed that it was bought for the biggest Wagyu cow. Two of Jiang Hai's cows were lucky to be selected, one ranked 11th and the other ranked 15th, entering the semifinals tomorrow. Chapter 237. Wilpa Manor, number A4566378, Rule Maya Company, number A27888940. At night, when the tourists left during the day and went to live in nearby hotels, or went back to their homes in New York to eat, rest, or sleep, some people were busy in the central activity room of the New York Beef Cattle Exhibition Hall. These people were the staff here. After a busy day, they were very tired, but they couldn't rest now because they had to choose the most popular 16 cows from so many cows. Of course, all of this was managed by a computer, but it also needed people to register. As for the number of the cows, a lot of things could be seen from it. It didn't mean that there were more than 500,000 cows for the selection. Today's exhibition hall only had more than 100 cows. Even if there were an average of 10 cows in each exhibition hall, there were only a little more than 1,000 cows. The numbers here were also learned. A represented a bull, B represented a cow, and C represented a dairy cow. The first two represented which state in the US the cow came from, the second represented which city it came from, and the last three represented the number of the cow. This was the same as the ID number, which was registered by the Beef Cattle Association. If there was an exception, it would be checked, so these numbers couldn't be wrong. Soaring Dragon Manor, serial number A479248. In the beginning, when they were reading, the other cows all came from some company. When they came here, it became a manor, which made the staff here a little surprised. Soaring Dragon Manor? Are you sure you didn't read it wrong? Hearing this person's words, the person next to him couldn't help but be surprised. In fact, this beef cattle exhibition had always been a stage for big companies to show their strength. This was because only those big companies could spend so much money to buy exhibition booths and prepare things for the exhibition booths. Even a booth in a bad location would cost $100,000 or $200,000, plus a TV, beautiful women, and so on. To participate in this exhibition, it would cost at least $25,000 or $60,000. Most ranchers in the US might not be able to earn $25,000 or $60,000 in a few years, let alone 1 year. It should be known that the median household income in the US wasn't the average, but the median. It was about $4,000 a month. After deducting state and national taxes, there would be about $3,300 to $3,400 left. $25,000 or $60,000 was definitely not a small income in the US. In the past, some private ranches would also participate in the exhibition hall, so when Jiang Hai signed up they didn't care. However, Jiang Hai could actually make it to the top 16, which surprised them a little. For a while many people looked over. And of course I didn't mispronounce it. It is indeed the Soaring Dragon Manor. Wait a minute, not only did he get one, he got two. This is really strange. Is this the result of a super rich second generation's money? Seeing that everyone was staring at him, this person was a little nervous. After hesitating for a moment, he also looked carefully. After making sure that he was not mistaken, he said in a serious tone. But as he continued to scan the list, he found that Jiang Hai's manor had not only one cow but two cows. What the F***ck? What the F***ck is going on? As soon as they heard this person's words, a lot of people gathered around the screen and looked at the person's data. Sure enough, Jiang Hai's two cows were ranked 10th and 15th. When they saw these two cows, they couldn't help but look at each other. This kind of thing was really rare. Hey, you guys are just surprised because you haven't seen it before. The owner of that manor is the new Asian this year. Didn't he invite Selena Gomez today? It's not surprising that he is so popular. Seeing the surprised eyes of his colleagues, a person who was processing data in the distance said with a smile. Hearing his words, everyone reacted. They remembered Jiang Hai's face, which didn't look special. But, because Jiang Hai was the only Asian senior among the people who came to participate today, they all had some understanding of Jiang Hai. Originally, when they saw that Jiang Hai wasn't prepared yesterday, they secretly laughed at Jiang Hai. They didn't expect that today Jiang Hai could invite the popular idol, Selena Gomez. At that time they really broke glasses. In fact, when Jiang Hai knew that Selena Gomez was coming, his glasses were also broken. With this reason there weren't too many shortlisted cows. After the recording was completed, the organizers also sent the shortlisted cows to the phones of the major companies and the shortlisted manor owners. Of course, the only shortlisted manor owner was Jiang Hai alone. After receiving this news, Jiang Hai couldn't help but clench his fists. This was good news for him. Of course, he also knew that this result was because of Selena Gomez's help. He immediately sent a text message to Selena Gomez to thank her for her help today. At this time, Selena Gomez was sitting in a banquet hall, eating dinner with a little uneasiness. After receiving Jiang Hai's text message, she couldn't help but glance at it, then replied with an okay gesture. Who is it? Seeing that Gomez actually replied to a text message while eating, a woman sitting opposite her said lightly. If Jiang Hai was here at this time, he would definitely recognize that the woman sitting opposite Selena Gomez was none other than Prawalton, but at this time she had changed out of her strong women's suit. Instead, she changed into a slightly loose dress, like a dress but also like pajamas. As for Selena, she was not as wild as she was during the daytime performance. Instead, she was like a kitten sitting opposite him. It's Jiang Hai, the person you asked me to help today. Sister Prawalton, are you interested in him? Hearing Prawalton's words, Selena Gomez couldn't help but chuckle. After putting down the phone, she asked her. Me? Oh, you're thinking too much. I think you should know my situation very well. Rather than saying that I have feelings for that man, it's better to say that I have feelings for his cattle. This guy is really good at raising cattle. It seems that I underestimated him a little. The cattle he raises should be very easy to slaughter into a special grade of beef. And this kind of beef is also the main product that our Sam's Club wants to expand. Hearing Selena Gomez's words, Prawalton put down the knife and fork in her hand and said with a serious face. Looking at Prawalton's burning eyes, Selena Gomez couldn't help but lower her head in embarrassment. Seeing her appearance, Prawalton was also interested. She slowly stood up, dragged her black dress and walked to Selena Gomez's side. Her right index finger gently lifted Selena Gomez's chin. She looked at Selena Gomez with a serious face and said slowly, "And even if I'm interested in you, baby." As Prawalton's voice fell, her red lips had already heavily kissed Selena Gomez's mouth. Facing such a strong kiss, Selena Gomez didn't know whether it was because she was in a daze or because she was mentally prepared. When she didn't resist, Prawalton's hands, which were originally around her shoulders, slowly moved forward. But just as she was about to reach the top, Selena Gomez's hand pressed on hers. Sister Prawalton, this won't do. Selena Gomez, who recovered a trace of consciousness, said hesitantly. You're not ready yet? You've been preparing for a long time, or you haven't forgotten that bastard boy? Looking at Selena Gomez in front of her, Prawalton asked with a serious face. I don't think about him anymore, I've completely broken up with him, it's over, there's no possibility of continuing, but my heart still can't let me and Sister Prawalton do that kind of thing with you. Hearing Prawalton's words, Selena Gomez immediately denied her words. As for her previous words, she hesitated a little. It doesn't matter, I believe you will understand one day, what's so good about a man. What a man can do, I can do, and even better than a man, you already know that, don't you? Seeing Selena's resistance, Prawalton shrugged. Although she likes her, she won't force her. Hearing Prawalton's explicit words, Selena Gomez's face couldn't help but blush, but she didn't speak anymore. She still used the fork in her hand to poke the steak in front of her. As for the waiter in the house, obviously he has been specially trained. He pretended not to see anything and looked straight ahead. At this time, Jiang Hai also looked straight ahead, but he wasn't looking at the air but at his cows. After they finished packing tonight, it was already late. At the moment, Jiang Hai decided to take the three of them to have a casual meal nearby, and then he will watch here at night in case someone comes to make trouble. In fact, Jiang Hai has another task here in addition to watching, that is, to strengthen these cows again. Looking at the two cows in front of him, Jiang Hai whispered in a low voice, I know you are the best. Now that you are in the semi-finals, I feel that you will have no problem at all entering the finals. Come on, I will give you more food tonight, come on. After muttering, he channeled the spirit energy from one of his scales into his hand. He didn't just inject it into the two cows that made it into the top 16, but injected it into all 15 cows. In an instant, the eyes of these cows, which already had some intelligence, seemed to have become more intelligent. But after looking at Jiang Hai, they returned to their original appearance. After all, the spirit energy contained in this scale was equivalent to a drop of blood in the past, and now that it was distributed to 15 cows, although there was some evolution, it wasn't too obvious. Chapter 238. Welcome to the New York Beef Show again. Today is the second day of the New York Beef Show, and also the semi-finals for the selection of the King of Bulls. Today our 16 bulls will be graded in order, and the top 8 with the highest scores will enter the finals. Now please give a cheer. Yesterday we ranked 16th in popularity, the bull from the Roger Paltrow Company in Kansas, Baby Superpower. As the host's voice fell, a strong bull walked onto the stage. After the bull walked onto the stage, the man kept talking and introducing the situation of the bull. At this time, Jiang Hai and the others were sitting together backstage. Except for them, the other people and bulls were quite happy. Thinking about it, it was understandable. The people here were all representing their own companies. Only Jiang Hai represented himself. In addition, he didn't have a good relationship with the local tyrant, the Cartwright Company, so no one would risk offending the Cartwright Company to make friends with Jiang Hai. Of course, if they knew that Jiang Hai had 20,000 beef cattle with special grade A beef, they would probably forget about the Cartwright Company in an instant. This was the advantage and disadvantage of capitalism. This was a game, a crocodile's game, and everything depended on money. Jiang Hai didn't care about the attitude of these people, and he just studied the mobile phone with his subordinates. Boss, even if we don't get the king of cattle this time, our manor will be famous. There are a total of 16 cattle, and our manor has 2 of them in the finals. This is a rare event. Looking at Jiang Hai, Robbins couldn't close his mouth since yesterday when he found out that his manor had 2 of them in the finals. For him, this was something he didn't even dare to think about before. It was not an exaggeration to say that the United States was the world's largest beef cattle producer. The amount of beef cattle here was several times more than the second place, Wuxia, and their population was only a quarter of Wuxia's. It was precisely because of this ratio of population and the amount of beef that they had. Therefore, in the United States, ordinary beef was indeed much cheaper than domestic beef, even if it was converted to RMB. In addition, the people in the United States loved beef crazily. Therefore, the people who made a living in the United States, other than the cowboys, the manor owners, and the supermarket owners, the middlemen, which were the livestock companies, also made a lot of money. In modern society, no matter what it was, it had to be advertised. And the best advertisement was a competition. He wanted to let others know that his cow was better than others, and it had to be done in a fair, just, and open environment. It was precisely because of such an environment and market that some businessmen involved in politics began to hold various beef competitions. Of course, various state governments and municipal governments were also very active in participating. As the number of competitions increased, the various regions would also filter out some of the weaker competitions and not allow them to hold them anymore. However, some competitions that had an official background and a good reputation would continue. The New York Beef Show was such a competition. Needless to say, New York was the financial center of the United States and even the world. But a long time ago the people here also raised cattle. But later on they stopped raising cattle. Although there were almost no large-scale cattle farms in New York, every move here was related to the fate of the cattle industry in the United States. This was because the price of beef and forage was set here. Although the livestock industry in the eastern United States was not as developed as the central United States and the northwestern United States, the beef show here was not the best in the country, but it was still one of the top 5 in the country. In such a beef show, being able to rank in the top 16 was a good advertisement. In the past, only the large livestock companies could get a share of the cake. Now Jiang Hai took away 2 pieces of the cake. It would be strange if the large livestock companies would care about Jiang Hai. Moreover, they could do him a favor. It will be our turn soon. Belle and I will go out first. Then, Cece and Robbins will go out when it is the 10th contestant. Listening to the host's introduction of the 16th ranked bull, Super Baby, Jiang Hai's first bull was about to go on stage. Who told them to be the 15th bull? Okay. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the 3 people nodded. They had no objections. Jiang Hai did a good job. At the very least, there was a cowboy in each group, and there was someone who could control the situation. Seeing that no one had any objections, Jiang Hai and Belle stood up and walked to the faraway cowshed. This was because many bulls, especially bulls, were very aggressive. It was still spring now, and if a bull went berserk, ordinary people would not be able to hold it back. Therefore, the organizers almost never let bulls from different companies meet under any circumstances, just like now. These bulls stayed in their respective cars and were surrounded by cloth to prevent other bulls from seeing each other. But just as Jiang Hai and Belle were about to walk to his F-750 trailer, a group of people stood up. However, a group of people also stood up. The leader of the group was Paul K. I really didn't expect you to enter the semi-finals so easily. However, your good luck ends here. Facing Jiang Hai, Paul K said with a ruthless face. At first he was a little afraid of Jiang Hai. Because when Jiang Hai bet with him he was full of confidence. He really thought that Jiang Hai had some kind of bull king. But after yesterday's discussion he found that Jiang Hai's bulls were very ordinary. Because in other people's eyes, Jiang Hai's bulls were almost the same. Except for the different patterns on their bodies, there was almost no difference. At least in the eyes of a layman like him, he could not see what was so good about Jiang Hai's bulls. No matter what, there needed to be a comparison. But Jiang Hai's bulls did not have a comparison. When a group of 2-meter-tall people stood together, you wouldn't notice how tall they were. It was like sitting in front of a TV and watching an NBA game. You wouldn't pay too much attention to this problem. However, when a 2-meter-tall person suddenly stood beside a group of 1.8-meter-tall people, it was very obvious. Therefore, in the eyes of people like Paul K., who couldn't tell the density of the meat and the fat content of the beef at a glance, it was impossible for Jiang Hai to have 15 bull kings. He must have 15 ordinary bulls. And Jiang Hai did not have a bull king. With such strength in his opinion, Jiang Hai was bound to lose. Jiang Hai's popularity yesterday proved it. If he did not use his personal connections in the end to invite Selena Gomez, he might not even have a spot. But even so, in the face of the bull kings chosen by their companies, Jiang Hai still had no chance. Prepare $1 million. In the face of this guy's clamor, Jiang Hai looked at him with some pity. If he could live in a dream forever, it would be a very good thing for him. But Jiang Hai was not a good person. He was very willing to wake him up with water when he was sleeping soundly. You. Hearing Jiang Hai's tough reply, Paul K could not help but stare at Jiang Hai angrily. Well, I want to see how you use your ordinary bulls to win against our company's bulls. Yesterday, Cartwright Company ranked second in the popularity ranking. In their opinion, other than Suzuki's bull, their bulls were worthy of being called the Bull King. And the people in the United States were more or less discriminating and xenophobic. As long as their company's bulls were not really a few levels lower than that bull, then this year's champion would still be theirs. As for Jiang Hai, he was no longer in their sight. So confident, do you want to raise the stakes? Seeing Paul K's appearance, Jiang Hai chuckled and said to him, "Umph." When he heard that Jiang Hai wanted to use money to pressure people again, although he wanted to agree, his rationality told him that he could not. Because even if he was really sure of winning, it was better to be safe than sorry. What if today's judges' brains were damaged, or they had already been bought by Jiang Hai? So after Jiang Hai's voice fell, he did not agree. Will accept. But just as he was about to leave, suddenly a voice that Jiang Hai was familiar with came from behind him. Jiang Hai looked up and found that the person who came was none other than the manager of Cartwright Company. Manager? Seeing that his manager actually stood up for him, Paul K was very surprised. What's going on? The day before yesterday, when Jiang Hai said that he wanted to raise the stakes, his manager didn't dare to agree. Why did he dare to do it today? We accepted your bet, but I won't bet on who can win the Bull King. I only bet that you can't win. Walking to Paul K's side, the manager looked at Jiang Hai with a serious face and said, "Yesterday's incident was not small." Even Paul K secretly went to look at Jiang Hai's beef bulls. How could he not collect information about his opponent? Unlike Paul K, who could judge Jiang Hai's bulls with his own eyes that they were all ordinary bulls. But he could still use other methods to prove that Jiang Hai's bulls were all ordinary bulls. In the end, he discovered that Jiang Hai's bulls really weren't good bulls. They were ordinary Angus bulls. Although there was no detailed medical report, 6 months ago when Jiang Hai bought the bulls, Paul K still managed to get the medical report of the bulls through his connections. Could an ordinary bull be turned into a bull king after only half a year of breeding? Regardless of whether other people believed it or not, Paul K did not believe it. In addition, he had also spoken to his father last night. He could afford $10 million. Most importantly, he could use this opportunity to not only trample on Jiang Hai and make $10 million, but he could also advertise himself, a free advertisement. But even though he was certain that Jiang Hai couldn't win the Bull King, he still played a word game. He wasn't betting on whether he or Jiang Hai could win the Bull King, because Suzuki and Truman had the same chance. So he was betting that Jiang Hai's bulls couldn't win the Bull King. In other words, not only did Jiang Hai have to defeat his bulls, but he also had to defeat all the bulls here. Hearing this, Jiang Hai chuckled and said directly to the person opposite him, "Okay, let's make a bet." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Cartwright's lawyer immediately handed the printed bet contract to the two of them. Basically, the bet didn't change, but it changed from Jiang Hai and Paul K to Jiang Hai and Cartwright's company. And the bet turned into whether or not Jiang Hai's cow can win the New York Beef Cattle Show's championship. The bet was $10 million in cash. Whoever lost the bet had to transfer the money to the other party's bank account within an hour after the winner was announced. Otherwise, it would be considered a breach of contract. The breach of contract was $100 million, and the winner could file a lawsuit at any time. This kind of bet was impossible in China because gambling of any kind was not allowed in China. But it was possible here. When Jiang Hai saw the other party take out the contract, he knew that the other party came prepared. He took a look at it and sent a photo to Moses Adams. When Moses Adams received the photo, he knew that the Cartwright company had suffered a big loss this time. Don't forget that as Jiang Hai's lawyer, Moses Adams went to Jiang Hai's place and ate a lot of beef. Although the chef in Jiang Hai's manner was not skilled, when the beef was processed in a Western restaurant, the taste was unforgettable. He knew that Cartwright's company would definitely lose. So he immediately looked at the contract. After confirming that there were no traps, he called Jiang Hai. After getting the confirmation, Jiang Hai signed his name on it without saying anything. The manager on the other side also signed his name, Rosalind Cartwright, and added their company's seal. When the contract came into effect, the host at the front desk announced the score of the first cow. The staff began to urge Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai calmly put the contract in his pocket and nodded to Belle Lester. Seeing Jiang Hai's movement, Belle Lester opened the door of the trailer immediately. With the sound of hydraulic pressure lifting the door, a majestic bull walked out of the trailer. When the bull swept its gaze over everyone like a king, everyone was stunned. Didn't he say that he only had 15 ordinary cows? What is this? An American who had been smoking in the distance didn't even notice that his cigarette had burned out. His eyes were fixed on the giant beast behind Jiang Hai, his face full of shock. As for Rosalind Cartwright, who was closest to the bull, his pupils had unconsciously dilated. Yesterday they had only seen the cows from afar. In order to prevent accidents, the organizer had set up a 3-meter iron fence between the cows and the cows to separate them. That was why he hadn't seen the cows from such a close distance. At the same time, he had never thought that he could feel the aura of a ferocious beast from a cow. Under the gaze of the cow, which seemed to be inspecting its territory, Jiang Hai reached out and grabbed one of the cow's horns. The cow wanted to resist at first. This was the difference between a cow and Jiang Hai's pet. Pets were smarter. And this cow at most had the IQ of a 2- or 3-year-old child. It did not know what obedience was. This was why Jiang Hai didn't feel bad when he killed the cows. Facing twice the strength of a human, the cow had no choice but to let Jiang Hai press its head down. Now, we are going to participate in the competition. Remember to prepare $10 million in cash. Looking at Rosalind Cartwright in front of him, Jiang Hai's lips curled into an evil smile. At least in his eyes, it was an evil smile. Chapter 239. Next, we will welcome the bull that ranked 15th yesterday. This bull is from the same place as the 10th bull that will appear next. They are from our neighboring province. Next, let's welcome Robin's number 1 from the Soaring Dragon Manor in Winthrop Town, Massachusetts. The host on stage shouted after the staff member explained the situation. As his voice fell, they saw 2 young men slowly walking out from the backstage with a cow. When the cow appeared, many of the audience couldn't help but gasp in shock. Many of them had seen Jiang Hai's bull yesterday. After all, Selena Gomez's performance had been very impressive. Originally, they had only seen Jiang Hai's bull because Selena had voted for Jiang Hai. In the eyes of most people, there was nothing special about Jiang Hai's 15 bulls that were almost the same. Just as Paul K had thought, it was easy to raise 1 bull king, but it was almost impossible to raise 2 bulls king. If all 15 bulls were basically the same, then it proved that Jiang Hai's bulls were ordinary bulls. However, when Jiang Hai's bull was pulled onto the stage today, these people were a little confused. Whether it was good or not depended mainly on the comparison. On Jiang Hai's side, Robin's number 1, this was also Robin's Garcia's idea. When the staff called yesterday to say that they wanted to name the bulls, the first names that came to Jiang Hai's mind were Big Bull and Air Bull, which were translated into English as Wambulu and Tubulu. It was really a little silly. Later he thought of calling them Bronze Bull and Iron Bull. However, this name was also rejected directly. In the end, Robin said that these bulls were raised by him and were like his children. He wouldn't use the surname Garcia because it was blasphemous to his ancestors, but he would use the name Robins. Hence, he called them Robin's number 1 and Robin's number 2. Well, the topic was a little off topic. Let's get back to it. The first bull before Jiang Hai went on stage, which was the bull that ranked 16th yesterday, was a Hayford bull. Actually, this cow was not bad. It weighed about 1150 kilograms and was one of the oldest breeds of cattle in the world. It had a broad body, a well-developed chest, a short head, a wide forehead and a short and thick neck. It was covered in reddish-brown fur and looked very good. It was just that the whiteness of its face made it look like a skull, so its ranking was a little low. But to be honest, this was definitely a good cow. If this cow was sold as a whole, it would probably be sold for between $12,000 and $15,000 because it was going to be sold as a breeding cow. The judges gave this cow a high score of 8.74. With such a score, it was possible for it to directly enter the top 8. However, when Jiang Hai's bull came up, these people instantly felt that the previous bull's score was too high. This is an Angus bull. It's now 23 months old. It's a good age for gambling and breeding. It's 145.8 centimeters tall and weighs 805 kilograms. Although it's not as heavy as Super Baby, it's still a rare big guy among Angus bulls. And it looks like it's much more muscular than Super Baby. It wasn't the host's first time hosting such a competition, so he had some understanding of bulls. As he read about this bull, he also observed it. He had to admit that in terms of body size, Jiang Hai's bull was a little thinner than the Hayford bull. However, the streamlined muscles on Jiang Hai's bull were really beautiful and terrifying. Most importantly, the aura on Jiang Hai's bull was completely different from that of ordinary bulls. If other bulls stood here, they would just be bulls. If there was a wild beast beside them, they would be food. No matter how strong and big this bull was, Jiang Hai's bull had its own wild nature. Although it stood there without moving, when its smart eyes swept around, many people would feel their buttholes tighten, as if they were being stared at by a wild beast. This was the strength of Jiang Hai's bull. I haven't seen this bull for a night, but it seems to have become stronger. In the crowd, Prawalton was also sitting there, but the people sitting beside her were all her subordinates. Looking at the bull on the stage, her eyes couldn't help but flash. She felt that she had bet on the right thing. Jiang Hai's bull was really not an ordinary bull. Dad, this bull is very good. On the other side, Zhang Dihai's family of 4 was sitting together. His eldest son also pushed up his glasses and whispered to his father. This man also knew about Jiang Hai's existence. But he didn't think that this man would have any relationship with him. He was nothing more than his father's friend. But now it seems that this guy will be a great help to his family's business. Of course I know, my little friend, is he such a simple person? After listening to his son's words, looking at Jiang Hai and the bull on the stage, Zhang Dihai's eyes narrowed, because he remembered that this guy has 20,000 bulls like this. This bull is so beautiful. It's so wild, I feel that if it wasn't for the 2 people on the stage, it might have rushed over. Those eyes are so beautiful. If this bull is not the king of bulls, then what is it? I really doubt that such a beautiful bull was only ranked 15th yesterday. There were many people who had the same thoughts as Zhang Dihai and Prawalton. However, most of these people chose to shut up because behind them, there were some Western restaurants and some supermarkets. Now they are already considering whether to discuss the quota with Jiang Hai. And now, the people who are talking are basically tourists. In the eyes of tourists, Jiang Hai's bull is really good. Next, the basic introduction has been done. Please give the judges a score. The host touched Jiang Hai's Robin's number 1 lovingly and said with some reluctance. He has been hosting here for so long, and many things have happened that he doesn't want to recall, such as the bull suddenly going crazy, or the bull not cooperating and kept moving, or the bull urinating and defecating on the stage and so on, but the most unbearable thing for him is the stench on the bull. He is not an ordinary tourist or a judge. The judges can shut up, but he can't. If he keeps opening his mouth to speak, the stench will enter his body, and even cause problems with his body. But Jiang Hai's bull solved this problem to the greatest extent. Jiang Hai's bull also has some smell, but it is more of the fragrance of grass, not the stench of the bull itself. This kind of smell can't be brushed, this is the feeling of nature. When he thought that after Jiang Hai's bull went down, the bull behind Jiang Hai's bull was still smelly, he was a little reluctant to let Jiang Hai's bull go down. But no matter what, he was still a responsible host, so he still followed the rhythm with a serious face. Before giving the score, I have a question to ask this young man. Young man, where are you from? Just as the host was about to ask the judges to give the score at this time in the audience, an old man slowly stood up and asked Jiang Hai. I am from Wuxia. I came to the United States to invest in a ranch. Now I am in Winthrop. Looking at the old man in front of him, Jiang Hai did not refuse to answer, but he stood up and said to him, These bulls, are you the one who raised them? Looking at Jiang Hai in front of him, the old man pushed his glasses and asked with some excitement. Although I can't say that I raised them, they are indeed produced in my manor. The main credit goes to my cowboys. Jiang Hai thought for a moment. He would not tell his secret to others, not even his closest relatives. Therefore this was not the time to claim credit. If he pushed the credit to the cowboys, he would get a lot of benefits in one fell swoop. Sure enough, after hearing Jiang Hai's words, Belle, who was standing next to Jiang Hai, couldn't help but have a look of excitement on his face. Then I wonder, are there many of these bulls in your manor? Hearing that Jiang Hai didn't claim credit, the old man was a little surprised. After all, the thoughts of the people in the United States are different from the thoughts of the people in China. In his opinion, with such an opportunity to show his face, it was difficult for someone like Jiang Hai, who was less than 30 years old, to control himself. He estimated that when the time came, he would shout that all the credit was his, but Jiang Hai did not let him do as he wished. It's okay. Hearing that the old man wanted to inquire about the secrets of his manor, Jiang Hai didn't say much. Let me introduce myself. My name is Babbitt Hill, an animal protection scholar. I see that your bulls not only have the aura of intelligence but also the aura of the wild. This kind of aura should be called aura in Wuxia. Many of the animals we protect now are artificially bred. After releasing them into the wild, they lack the aura of intelligence, which makes it difficult for them to survive in the wild. I don't know if we can go to your manor for research after this conference. Looking at Jiang Hai, the old man didn't beat around the bush and spoke directly to him. Hearing his words, the people next to him couldn't help but exclaim in a low voice. This was almost like a pie falling from the sky. This old man, Babbitt Hill, was very famous in the United States. He even sat in the front row at the meetings of the World Environmental Protection Organization. Any place that he took a fancy to was likely to become a conservation area. Not to mention other things, the price of the land there would instantly increase by more than 10 times. If he was not willing to sell, he could casually get some formulas and plans from his hands. It was enough to make the manor both famous and rich. Hearing the old man's words, the people in the backstage clenched their hands at this time. They looked at Jiang Hai with a nervous, envious, and jealous face. However, it seemed that Jiang Hai was not familiar with this old man, and even if he was familiar with him, he would not let him study it. Let's talk about this later. Old man, hurry up and give the score. There are other contestants behind. Chapter 240. It seems like I'm too anxious. Let's talk about it after the competition. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the old man nodded and sat down again. In fact, he found a way out for himself. He also heard that Jiang Hai seemed to be unwilling to let them go to his manor. But the more it was like this, the more the old man was interested in Jiang Hai's manor. After the old man sat down, it was time for the official scoring. There were a total of 6 people who fought. Except for the old man, Jiang Hai did not know the others. But this did not affect their evaluation of Jiang Hai's cow. The first old man scored 9. 7 points, the second 9. 3 points, the third 9. 5 points, the fourth 9. 3 points, the fifth 9. 6 points, and the sixth 9. 6 points. Such a score was already very terrifying. The 6 points were summed up and the final score of Jiang Hai's Robin's number 1 was 9. 45 points. Such a score was already quite good. At least it was inevitable for him to enter the finals. The reason why this score was not particularly high was mainly because of the Angus cow itself. This kind of cow was really common in the United States, no, the world. It was a breed that originated in the United Kingdom. Later, when the United States was established, the United States introduced this kind of cow. With new breeding, the Angus cow had powerful abilities. Among the total number of beef cows in the United States, the Angus cow accounted for 1/3 of them. And with the United States as the center, it spread to other major countries such as Canada, New Zealand, and so on. They mainly bred this kind of cow. There were even breeding cows in China, but they could not import the most suitable breed with the most meat. This breed was not sold in the United States. Therefore, it was not an exaggeration to say that the Angus cow was the national cow of the United States. But it was also because of this that there were too many Angus cows. When there were too many of them, they were not commonly seen. A purebred Tibetan Mastiff, if mutated, would definitely be worth a lot of money. Even if there was no Tibetan Mastiff, it would still be very valuable. But a Chinese pastoral dog, even if it had evolved to kill a wolf, was still just a pastoral dog. Jiang Hai's Robin's number 1 was definitely the Angus cow with the highest score in recent years. When the score came out, the audience could not help but applaud. Many people here were old people. They were also surprised that Jiang Hai's cow could get such a high score. But what was certain was that Jiang Hai's cow must be in the top 8. When the host finished announcing the score, Jiang Hai also walked back to the backstage, but when he reached the backstage, the atmosphere was a little strange. The people from the companies who completely ignored Jiang Hai even took the initiative to nod and greet him when they saw that Jiang Hai had returned. Although they did not know the meat yield of Jiang Hai's cow and the quality of the meat, they felt that there might be some possibility of cooperation with Jiang Hai in the future. Although their attitude towards Jiang Hai did not change completely, it was not as bad as before. In the face of the goodwill from these companies, Jiang Hai did not go up to flatter them, but he also did not coldly refuse. The other party smiled and nodded to him, so he nodded back. As for smiling, at least there was no smile today. But this only meant that these companies did not have a direct conflict with Jiang Hai. The people from the Cartwright company were a little embarrassed. Compared to the cow that Jiang Hai brought in and their cow, many people looked at each other. Especially Paul Kay and Rosalind Carlyle. Their faces were so dark that water was about to drip out. But at this time they had nothing to say, so they could only sit there and wait. Not long after, Jiang Hai's second cow also appeared. When the second cow appeared, everyone could not help but take a deep breath. It was because Jiang Hai's cow was really beautiful. Pulling the cow, Robbins went to the stage to welcome even louder cheers. Backstage, the atmosphere was even more oppressive, especially for the Cartwright company. The fact was really a little beyond their expectations. They originally thought that Jiang Hai only had 15 ordinary cows, but they did not expect that there was a story behind these cows. At this time, they did not think that Jiang Hai's 15 cows were all cow kings, but at least Jiang Hai's 2 cows were still very threatening to them. Time flew quickly and the morning exhibition ended. In the end, the highest score was obtained by the Suzuki Company's 5A Wagyu, which got the highest score 9.52 points. The second was Jiang Hai's Robin's number 2 9.47 points. The third was still Jiang Hai's cow Robin's number 1 9.45 points. Then it was the cows of other companies, but the gap between them was a little big. The difference between Jiang Hai's cow and the first Wagyu was only 0.5 points and the fourth cow was only 0.2 points worse than Jiang Hai's cow, only 9.33 points. The Cartwright Company's cow, at least in appearance, was ranked 5th 9.27 points. There was also a gap of 1.8 points from Jiang Hai's Robin's number 1. This gap was obvious in the eyes of discerning people. The 2 cows were really different. If Jiang Hai's cow was a Wagyu or a Belgian blue cow or a Charolais cow, or even a Limousin cow, or a Zymental cow, Jiang Hai's score would probably be increased by a few tenths, and it was not impossible to threaten the status of the 5A Wagyu. When the organizer announced the ranking of tomorrow's top 8 cows, there was a deafening cheer, and Jiang Hai's face also showed a smile. For them, the appearance of these 2 cows was only secondary. After killing the cows tomorrow, when the marble veins appeared, they would let these people know what a real cow was. Now that they had broken into the semi-finals, Jiang Hai and others had no meaning to wait here. So they directly loaded the cows into the car and returned to their cow sheet. After Jiang Hai and others left, the backstage here was lively again. In their view this time, except for the 2 cows in Jiang Hai's manor, the other 6 cows were selected. They were quite satisfied with the cake this time. In the final 8, Jiang Hai's cows were in the top 2. Suzuki's 2 Wagyu cows were in the semi-finals, and Cartwright's 2 Angus cows were also in the semi-finals. One was an Angus cow and the other was a Belgian blue cow. But everyone knew that the Belgian blue cow looked good, but its meat was not very good. It was just a kind of muscle cow, so even if it was in the semi-finals, its ranking would not be high. Because of this, the Cartlet company's main focus was the Angus bull. Unfortunately, their bull's ranking in the preliminaries wasn't very good. This time the bet with Jiang Hai might be a little dangerous for them. These 3 companies had already occupied 6 of the top 8 spots. The remaining 2 spots belonged to a company from Texas, Truman Company. An Angus cow from this company had also made it into the top 8, but it was ranked 7th. The last one was from Baveda Company, whose Charolais steak was ranked 6th. These were today's top 8. Suzuki's Wagyu 1 was ranked 1st, followed by Jiang Hai's Robins 1 and 2. Cartwright's Belgian blue cow was ranked 4th, Suzuki's Wagyu 2 was ranked 5th, Baveda's Charolais cow was ranked 6th, Truman Company's Angus cow was ranked 7th, and Cartwright's Angus cow was ranked 8th. Originally these 2 Angus cows should have been ranked higher. Indeed, the quality of these 2 cows was not bad. But the bad thing was that Jiang Hai's 2 cows were too perfect. Everything was afraid of being compared, and this was true for cows as well. If it was a different kind of cow, they might have a chance to have the upper hand like Wagyu, Charolais, Belgian blue cows and so on. But Angus cows were of the same kind. Even if their sizes were similar, their aura was completely different. Obviously, the people from Cartwright Company were not satisfied with this result. Not long after Jiang Hai left, these people also left. But when they returned to the hotel, Rosalind Cartwright, who had made a bet with Jiang Hai, threw his suit on the sofa. Right now, there was no one who was more depressed than him and had a bigger headache than him. This was called everything. He had just signed a new bet with Jiang Hai, and Jiang Hai had given him a resounding slap. Looking at Jiang Hai's 2 cows, he felt that his face was a little swollen. What was this? He had wanted to use this opportunity to trample on Jiang Hai, but in the end he was thrown to the ground by Jiang Hai. It was too embarrassing. Manager, what should we do now? Looking at Rosalind Cartwright, besides him, the one who was most afraid was Paul K. After all, he was the one who had made a bet with Jiang Hai first. Although this bet had now been transferred to the company, and even if he lost he did not need to pay, the beginning of this disaster was caused by him. If he caused the company to lose 10 million yuan, it would be a good thing if the company directly fired him. If some of the previous small debts were dug out, it was possible that he would be sent to prison directly. So now he was also very afraid. Looking at the manager, who was still in a rage, Paul K. asked carefully. You ask me what to do? I want to ask you what to do. You could have provoked anyone, but you provoked him. If we are suppressed by a manor at this beef show, do you think we will still have a foothold in the East? It would have been better if Rosalind Carlyle had not heard Paul Carlyle's voice, but when he heard Paul Carlyle's words he shouted loudly. Hearing the manager's roar, Paul K. hesitated for a moment, then gritted his teeth and said, Boss, we didn't expect that guy's cows to be so good. Since he really has the ability to win, should we think of a way to stop him from participating? Chapter 241. There's a picture of his father hanging on it. The moon was bright and the stars were sparse. In the cowshed on the outskirts of New York, Jiang Hai was leaning against a pile of hay. He was looking at his phone while eating. After spending a lot of time with these cows, Jiang Hai had gradually gotten used to their taste. At least, he could still eat when he was around 15 cows. Now Jiang Hai was playing his crosstalk routine. As for whether it was copyrighted, Jiang Hai didn't know. He just downloaded it online. It wasn't just one person who did the crosstalk, but all the members of a certain German society. Now he was performing the crosstalk routine of the certain German society's boss, Bosqua. He had to admit that in the current situation where most of the people in the country were the main theme, the crosstalk routine of a certain German society was quite fun. Although some people seemed a little vulgar and a little bad and always made jokes about the supporting actor, this was the joke. Just like what Bosqua's partner Yu Xiaobao said, this was their job. If crosstalk couldn't make the audience laugh, then what was the point of it? Jiang Hai admitted that he was a layman. He liked money, beautiful women, and a luxurious life, so he still liked these things very much. Although he was in the United States, in addition to watching crosstalks, he also often watched domestic variety shows. Of course, he didn't like to watch shows that were obviously young and old. He was quite interested in shows like Running Man, The God of Songs on the Internet, Refrigerator, and so on. On the contrary, he didn't like the variety shows in the United States very much. For example, The Voice of America, America's Got Talent, Conan, Oprah's Talk Show, and so on. He felt that they were ordinary because sometimes the jokes in them were really a little too dirty. Many people in the United States could talk about that kind of things on TV without batting an eyelid. The length of a man, the time, the skills, whether a woman liked to do that kind of thing, the sound of her moaning, and so on. These were all talked about everywhere. Jiang Hai was a rural farmer who didn't have a girlfriend and lived in the suburbs. If he always watched these things, his nutrition couldn't keep up. Of course, there were some programs that he liked to watch. For example, Victoria Has a Secret and so on. It was like no one had a secret. Looking at the screen swaying back and forth, Jiang Hai's heart would become calmer. And it was purely admiring the clothes. Regardless of whether you believe it or not, Jiang Hai believed it. In the United States, when it came to variety shows, the most popular one was WWE, which was also known as the American Professional Wrestling Federation. It was divided into several channels: Raw, SmackDown, TNA, ROH, Me, etc. In America, whether it was South America, North America, or even Japan, wrestling was very popular. However, this kind of thing could only be watched as entertainment because the fights were all fake. Whether it was winning or losing or the fighting scenes, it was all going according to the script. Jiang Hai had also watched WWE before, but that was when HHH and Galbo were competing. At that time, it might have been a real fight because there would be blood in the ring almost every week. According to the current saying, these people were all good actors. Regardless of whether there was a script or not, at least it looked real. But now, it was just that. Sometimes, before the karate chop hit the opponent would have already reacted. For example, most of the women's competitions were like this. But then again, Jiang Hai still liked to watch women's competitions. His nutrition was almost unable to keep up. It was better for him to watch domestic variety shows to calm his heart. Today was the quarterfinals and tomorrow was the quarterfinals. This was also the last night and it needed to be watched carefully. Because Jiang Hai's only veteran cowboy, Robbins Garcia, was going to the slaughterhouse tomorrow to watch the cows being slaughtered. In order to avoid any accidents, Robbins Garcia would not be on watch tonight. Jiang Hai would be on watch for 4 hours alone. After returning to the hotel, Jiang Hai ate, washed up and went to bed. He slept from 8 o'clock until 1:30 in the middle of the night. After washing up, he drove to replace Eleanor Cece. From 2 o'clock in the middle of the night until 6 o'clock in the morning, it was Jiang Hai's time. Jiang Hai's physical fitness was quite good. Not only did he watch for 4 hours, but he also slept for 6 hours before that. If he did not sleep, it should not be a problem for him to stay awake for 3 to 5 days. If he received training, it might be even longer. However, Jiang Hai was not willing to suffer. Why would he train for nothing? If he had the time, he might as well think about how to improve the scales on his body. It was only one level up, but the improvement method was obviously different. At the same time, his strength had doubled. If he leveled up again, there might be more changes. Therefore, at this time, Jiang Hai was very calm. He just sat there drinking tea, watching crosstalk and eating melon seeds. Time unknowingly passed by. Behind Jiang Hai, the cows were also kneeling there, breathing evenly. Of course, in addition to the air above them, there was also a lot of air below them. Cows were creatures that liked to fart the most in the world. You can say that they don't eat soybeans and drink cold water every day, so how could they fart so much? Fortunately, Jiang Hai was sitting in the upper wind. If he was sitting in the lower wind, he would have suffered. Time passed by, and in the blink of an eye, it was already 3 o'clock in the middle of the night. As the easternmost region of the United States, the sun rose very early here. The United States was not like Wuxia, where there was only one standard time. There were 2 standards here. The time in the east and west of the United States was different, with a difference of about an hour. But an hour could not stop the sun from rising quickly here. At about 3 o'clock in the morning, the sun was about to rise. The darkness before dawn was also the darkest, and the human body was also the most sleepy in this place. Even Jiang Hai couldn't help but yawn, but just as he yawned, he suddenly saw several figures in the distant darkness, slowly walking towards him. Who is it? Rubbing his eyes, Jiang Hai directly turned on the camera of his mobile phone and shouted at the people in the distance. It's me. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the people on the opposite side also shouted. Generally speaking, such a standard answer would make the people who called lower their guard, but Jiang Hai's vigilance suddenly rose because this voice was very unfamiliar. "Stand there, who are you?" Hearing the words of these people, Jiang Hai shouted loudly. Hearing Jiang Hai's shout, the cattle that were sleeping behind Jiang Hai woke up, but unfortunately, cattle are not night vision animals, so they have nothing to do after waking up, just lying there with their eyes open. This time, after hearing Jiang Hai's words, the few people here did not answer, but they who were just walking started to run at this time. Seeing them running towards him, Jiang Hai's eyes narrowed. He could be sure that these people absolutely had no good intentions. He immediately put the mobile phone on the haystack next to him and turned on the recording function. At this time, these people also rushed over. When they walked in, Jiang Hai saw that there were a total of 5 people. In addition to 4 empty-handed, one person was carrying something on his back. Seeing that Jiang Hai was actually recording, the 4 people here looked at each other, and in an instant 3 of them rushed towards Jiang Hai, while the other person and the person carrying something on his back walked towards the cowshed. Seeing the movements of these people, Jiang Hai knew that these people should be coming for his cattle. How can this be? These cattle are Jiang Hai's life. At this moment he no longer held back. The first thing he did was to rush towards the 3 people. When the 3 people saw that Jiang Hai dared to take the initiative to greet them, they didn't hold back and rushed towards Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai's guess was right. These people were here to deal with Jiang Hai's cattle. They had already learned about it before. Jiang Hai's cowshed was only guarded by Jiang Hai alone, and he did not have a gun. The 5 people did not have weapons. Not to mention that it was 5 against 1, even if it was 3 against 1, they did not think that Jiang Hai would be their opponent. Just like now, the first person who rushed over punched Jiang Hai's nose. Could be seen that these people were also good at fighting. The human body, or to be exact, the body of a man, had 3 biggest weaknesses. The first was the nose, the second was the stomach, and the third was the vital part. Hitting the nose was the easiest to cause a concussion. At the same time, the soreness of the nasal bones would accelerate the secretion of tears and blur the vision. This was equivalent to destroying the balance and vision of the opponent for a certain period of time. As for the stomach, it was because a punch would cause the person to feel weak and nauseous. As for the last vital part, it did not need to be said. All men knew it. As soon as he saw these people directly hit his nose, Jiang Hai understood that these people were also premeditated. However, his strong physical fitness was not a joke. He immediately tilted his head and dodged the opponent's fist. He pushed his left hand and the opponent felt a huge force coming from his arm. At this time, Jiang Hai's leg instantly kicked his lower abdomen. Bang! With a muffled sound, the man had already flown out upside down. Jiang Hai's kick directly sent him flying back 5 or 6 meters before he fell heavily on the ground. He clutched his lower abdomen and was in so much pain that he could not make a sound. Seeing that their companion was beaten down so quickly, the 2 people who rushed over together could not help but be stunned for a moment. However, Jiang Hai would not be stunned. Bale had taught Jiang Hai that when fighting, the most important thing to do was to be distracted. Taking advantage of the opponent's weakness was an inevitable choice. Therefore, Jiang Hai did not say anything at the moment. He had already rushed to the front of these 2 people. Chapter 242. Who the F***CK? Seeing that Jiang Hai didn't retreat but moved forward, these 2 people also panicked a little. However, their many years of fighting made them react immediately. One of them punched directly at Jiang Hai's temple, and the other kicked at Jiang Hai's left arm. Seeing the movements of these 2 people, Jiang Hai didn't say much. He blocked the person's fist that was aimed at his temple with his right hand. At the same time, he clamped the other person's leg with his left arm. After shaking off this person's fist, Jiang Hai's arm directly used the Great Sage Chop. In fact, it was his right fist that directly smashed down on this person's knee from top to bottom. Only a cracking sound was heard, and this person's knee had already bent outwards. Ah! This severe pain also invaded this person's brain, making this person's body soften instantly. He hugged his leg and began to howl loudly. Jiang Hai also let go of this person at this time. He turned around and dodged the person's leg that he had just blocked. His body shrank and he had already gotten into this person's arms. He aimed at the person's chin and used an elbow strike. Since these people came to find trouble with him, Jiang Hai wouldn't kill them with one punch. But at least he didn't go easy on them. After a cracking sound, this person flew backward. After turning 360 degrees in the air, he fell to the ground with a bang. Not only was his jaw broken, but his teeth were also knocked out by Jiang Hai. The most important thing was that this blow was transmitted to his brain. A concussion was inevitable. This time this person couldn't even get up. Looking at the three people who had been dealt with, Jiang Hai also turned his head and looked at the other two people. Although it was lively just now, in fact, the battle between Jiang Hai and these three people could be described as a flash of lightning. Almost in just a few seconds of contact, Jiang Hai had already beaten these three people down. At this time the two of them hadn't gone far. When they saw Jiang Hai looking at them, they couldn't help but quicken their pace. Unfortunately, no matter how fast they were, could they be faster than Jiang Hai? The first thing Jiang Hai did was to rush towards the two of them. Go! Seeing Jiang Hai coming over, the man who had been guarding the bag shouted and rushed towards Jiang Hai. This guy was black, very black. If he didn't speak, he could almost blend in with the surrounding scenery. Jiang Hai didn't notice before, but when Jiang Hai ran to his side, he was stunned. This guy was really tall. He was almost 10 meters tall and his whole body was full of muscles. His muscles were bulging and his cheeks were puffed up. It seemed that this guy should be the fighter in this group. Looking at this bastard who was more than one size bigger than him, Jiang Hai didn't retreat. Unless this guy was a robot, otherwise he would have to kneel down to Jiang Hai. Looking at the person in front of him, Jiang Hai had already rushed in front of him. He went up and kicked the guy in the chest. The huge force made the guy step back 5 or 6 steps, but he didn't fall. Jiang Hai also took this opportunity to run over again. Jiang Hai's height was not much shorter than him. With a height of more than 190 meters, he also ran vigorously. In a few steps, he ran in front of the big black man. He stepped on the ground with his right foot and jumped up in an instant. He grabbed the big man's head with both hands and used his left knee to hit the guy's face hard. In an instant, blood splattered everywhere. And Jiang Hai, who was about to fall, suddenly pulled his lower abdomen in the air at this time. The powerful ability to stay in the air made him pause for a moment. And in that instant, it was enough for him to turn his leg, which was originally spread out, and knee him again. 2 consecutive knee strikes. In an instant the guy's face really bloomed. At this time Jiang Hai fell again. But don't think that Jiang Hai just fell. His hands, which were originally holding the guy, were also propped up at this time. His 2 elbows with a momentum from above heavily hit the guy's head. Only 2 cracking sounds were heard. The guy's head unconsciously collapsed into 2 holes and his eyes rolled back. He directly lay on the ground and lost consciousness. Seeing Jiang Hai take care of his 4 accomplices so quickly, the people on the other side were also anxious. At this time he also understood that he probably couldn't escape, but his professionalism was still good. He didn't directly kneel down and beg for mercy. Maybe he also knew that even if he knelt down, Jiang Hai wouldn't spare him. So, without saying a word, he opened the bag he had been carrying and threw it towards Jiang Hai's cowsheet. F***ck you dare. Seeing this person's action, although Jiang Hai ran fast, he was still a step too late. He let the guy throw the contents of the bag into Jiang Hai's cowsheet. Just as the guy's face was showing a smile, Jiang Hai came over. Without saying anything, he went up and grabbed the guy's hair. Then his big fist, which was as big as a bowl, smashed the guy's face, body and stomach. The banging sound spread far in the night. At this time, the security guards of the cowshed and the people in the nearby cowsheds also heard these people's screams. They couldn't help but walk out hesitantly. Seeing Jiang Hai beat the guy here, most of the people guarding the cowshed didn't care. But the security guards here were different. They immediately rushed over and wanted to pull Jiang Hai away. "Sir, please calm down. Otherwise we'll have to use force." Seeing that the 3 people who came over failed to pull Jiang Hai away and were pushed down by Jiang Hai, the leader in charge of the security here shouted with a serious face. His men had already called the police. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai, who had already beaten the guy to a pulp, stopped. "What are you doing? You still have the nerve to pull me away. Do you know who these people are? Not only are they trying to harm me, but they are also trying to harm my cows. What kind of security guards are you?" After throwing the guy far away, Jiang Hai took back the phone that had been recording. After turning off the recording function, Jiang Hai said with a gloomy face. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the leader of the security team was stunned for a moment. Then he looked at the people who were still screaming on the ground. These people didn't seem to be from his security team. He didn't know who these people were. "Why are you still in a daze? I just saw these guys throw something into my cowshed. If there is any accident with my cow, I will sue you until you go bankrupt." Seeing these people in a daze, Jiang Hai did not stay still and shouted loudly. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the leader of the security team was shocked. He was also a small leader. The security of this beef show was rented to a security company and signed a contract. If any accident happened here, their company would have to pay a lot of money. And he, as the person in charge, must bear the brunt of the disaster. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, except for half of the people who stayed to watch Jiang Hai, the rest of the people quickly ran to Jiang Hai's cowsheet. Hey, it's too late. Seeing the movements of these people, the guy who was kicked out first clutched his chest and said with a face full of hatred. They really didn't think that Jiang Hai was so powerful that he beat them up like this. But it didn't matter, as long as they could complete the task, the money they got was definitely more than what they got from being beaten up a few times. Leader. Hearing the leader's words, the security team quickly poured into Jiang Hai's cowsheet. As soon as they entered the cowsheet, or to be exact, before they entered the cowsheet, they found a lot of soybeans on the ground. Several of them picked up the soybeans and looked at them. Their faces flashed a trace of panic, and they immediately ran back to the leader's side and whispered. When the leader saw the soybeans in the hands of these people, his face flashed a trace of surprise. He didn't have the leisure to look at Jiang Hai and ran in immediately. Jiang Hai also called Moses Adams and called Robbins and others to come over. At the same time he ran into the cowsheet. As soon as they entered the cowsheet, Jiang Hai and the security leader found that the ground of the cowsheet was full of soybeans. Soybeans were the same for cattle as carrots were for horses. It was something that they liked to eat very much. When raising cattle overseas, some people would feed them with soybeans, and soybeans were the most common ingredient in the feed. Very few cows could withstand the smell of soybeans. Of course, the soybeans that were sprinkled on the ground were not just soybeans. These soybeans were smeared with poison. The security leader smelled it and felt it. Just when he felt that Jiang Hai's cattle might suffer, at this time, Jiang Hai's 15 cattle were lying on the ground. Although some cattle were curious to smell the soybeans, none of them ate it. This was also a bad habit that Jiang Hai's cattle had developed. They had been used to the grassy taste of Jiang Hai's manor. They were not interested in food that didn't have that kind of natural smell. Obviously, these soybeans belonged to this kind of food. For a while, the security team, the security leader, and Jiang Hai looked at these cattle and these cattle looked at them. The scene was really a bit strange. After about a few minutes, the alarm outside made the security leader react. After looking at Jiang Hai with a little doubt, he waved his hand, indicating that everyone should move first. Immediately he helped Jiang Hai change the cowsheet and then clean the ground here. As for those people, they had been taken away by the police. Jiang Hai naturally had to go with them. After all, these people were beaten badly by Jiang Hai, but Jiang Hai didn't care. Because according to Moses Adams, he had the video and these people were beaten for nothing. But according to Moses Adams, although these people were beaten for nothing, they would not be sentenced to a heavy sentence. After all, their main target was the cattle, not Jiang Hai. Although poisoning cattle was also a crime, it was not a serious one. Chapter 243. Boss, is there no problem? At 9 o'clock in the morning, Jiang Hai also walked out of the police station. When he came out, Eleanor Cece had been waiting for him outside the police station for a long time. No problem, what about the game? Shaking his head, Jiang Hai said to Eleanor Cece. It doesn't matter. Robbins and Bell have been watching. Now they are sent to the officially designated slaughterhouse. It is impossible for the other party to do anything. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Eleanor Cece said with a serious face. After Jiang Hai called, the three of them rushed to the cowsheet. After confirming that Jiang Hai and the cows were fine, the three of them were relieved. Then Jiang Hai was taken to the police station to make a statement. After all, even if Jiang Hai has evidence, he still needs to go through the process. He beat the 5 guys very badly. Jiang Hai didn't let the 3 of them come with him. Instead, he asked them to watch there first and wait for the game to start. They must keep an eye on these cows. This is the most important thing. Don't forget, the purpose of Jiang Hai and the others coming here is to promote the manor, not just to come here for a walk. Indeed, someone invaded his cowsheet. The organizer must be responsible. The security company's responsibility is the greatest. This is unavoidable. If Jiang Hai wants, he can let these guys claim compensation, but the compensation is obviously only a compensation of 1,800,000, and the money he paid will be returned, that's all. For him, there is no difference between 1 million and 2 million under the premise of cattle. Then let's go quickly. Hearing Noel Cece's words, Jiang Hai patted him and said immediately. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Noel Cece also nodded, but just as the two were about to leave, a group of people ran over in the distance. The leader is the captain of the security team. In addition to him there are several people in suits. Mr. Jiang Hai, please wait a minute, I am the person in charge of the security of this exhibition. Can we talk? Looking at Jiang Hai, the fat leader said with a sincere face. Looking at him, Jiang Hai is very angry. If it weren't for the fact that his cows were fine, he would have sued this company until it went bankrupt. But now, even if nothing happened, Jiang Hai doesn't have a good impression of this company. However, while Moses Adams was driving here, he also told Jiang Hai that there must be a problem with the organizers of the exhibition. But because the organizers had already sold the security to this company, Jiang Hai didn't know what to do. So, even if something happened, it is the company's business, it has nothing to do with the exhibition. At the same time, because nothing happened and Jiang Hai beat someone up, he and his cows were not hurt. So, this security company must be responsible, but the responsibility will not be too big. At most, they will pay some money to settle it privately. Of course, if they want to sue them, they will be successful. But the total value of this company is only a little more than $1 million. Even if they win the lawsuit, there is no profit to speak of. If this is an ordinary American, they may have to think of other ways, but Jiang Hai is different. Wuxia people care about face more than anything else, so he will not let this company go easily. But for the specifics, Jiang Hai still has to discuss with Moses Adams. He has no time to deal with this group of people now. Go and talk to my lawyer. After coldly telling this person, Jiang Hai got into the car with Eleanor Cece. In the car he called Robbins and learned that the cows have been killed and skinned. The skins were given to them. As for the beef, it was sealed. They sent the beef back to the exhibition hall with the staff of the exhibition. After hearing this, Jiang Hai immediately drove to the exhibition hall with Noel Cece. When they arrived, the meat of today's beef was already on display in the exhibition hall. Today's display has nothing to do with yesterday's ranking. It is mainly based on the company. Jiang Hai's manor was attacked last night. Although the result is not clear, it is no secret here. So today the organizer specially sent Jiang Hai's 2 cows to the slaughterhouse. When the cows are killed, they are killed together, so there is a difference in time. So Jiang Hai's cows are arranged to be the last 2 to appear. The other 4 companies are the first to appear. The first to appear is half the host here, the Belgian blue cow from Cartwright Company. The Belgian blue cow is indeed a muscular cow, but as mentioned just now, the distribution of fat in the muscles of a muscular cow is not very good. So this cow looks good, but it may not be delicious. After it is killed, it is sent to the front of the stage. After the judges' reference, they finally gave it a score of 8.2. This kind of score meant that these people didn't think highly of this cow. Otherwise they would have given it a score of at least 8.5. However, the Cartwright Company didn't care about it. At the beginning this cow just wanted to make a name for itself. Now it has completed its mission. After Cartwright Company, Truman Company's Angus cow and Boveda Company's Charolais cow were sent up. The final result of the 2 cows is also good. Truman Company's Angus cow's final score is 8.8. The whole cow's meat is 64%. The eye meat and the upper brain have marbled lines, but the lines are not very good. Only about 0.5% of the meat can be regarded as special grade A beef. A bull weighs 750 kilograms, and the final meat is 480 kilograms. 5 kilograms of beef of superior grade, 37 kilograms of beef of special grade, 274 kilograms of beef of superior grade, and dozens of kg of beef of standard grade and commercial grade. Such beef cattle would be used as breeding cattle in ordinary manners. But here it can't even reach the average score of 9. It has to be admitted that the requirements of this exhibition are really strict. The score of 8.8 is not low, but it is definitely not high. With such a score, let alone winning the championship, it is difficult to even be in the top 3. In addition to this cow, the Charolais cow of the Boveda Company had also slaughtered out a special grade beef. Although the Charolais cow was bigger than the Angus cow, the special grade beef it obtained was much smaller than the Angus cow. Boveda Company had only obtained 1.7 kilograms of special grade beef, which was the lowest score for a cow king grade beef. After these 2 cows went on stage, the next one to go on stage was Suzuki's Wagyu. When this cow is sent up, Jiang Hai and the others also came to the exhibition hall. Oh, you actually came here. I heard that you were attacked last night. How is it? What happened? Seeing Jiang Hai and the others come, Paul K. of Cartwright Company came over with a smug face. It has nothing to do with you. You'd better pray that the bastards you found are stubborn enough. Otherwise your company will be finished. Needless to say, Jiang Hai knew that the five guys must be related to these people. But these guys are stubborn enough. After entering the police station, they still have a fearless expression. In the United States, a country that pays attention to democracy and human rights, extorting a confession by torture in the police station is not tenable. As for these guys, their criminal records were not as thin as a notebook. Even if Jiang Hai investigated them, these people would only be sent to prison for 1 or 2 years. In addition, Jiang Hai was very heavy-handed. These people would have to lie in the hospital for a few months before being sent to prison. This is really not a big deal for people who have a second home in prison. Moreover, Jiang Hai didn't know anyone from the underworld, so it wasn't easy to get information out of them. Don't talk nonsense. Otherwise I will sue you for slander. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Rosalind Cartwright came over and said to Jiang Hai with a serious face. Jiang Hai listened to his words and snorted disdainfully. Humph, what kind of people are you? You have a guilty conscience. No matter what, I want to mess with your company. What can your company do? Since you've made your choice, then we'll fight to the death. I hope you can hold on when the time comes. Looking at Rosalind Cartwright in front of him, Jiang Hai narrowed his eyes and said word by word. At this time there was also a burst of cheers at the front desk. Soon a staff member brought back the news of the Wagyu. Although it is not the strongest cattle of Suzuki, it is indeed very strong in Japan. This Wagyu does not look very conspicuous, but it is also quite strong. Wagyu is raised in different regions, so there are some slight differences in species. Just in Japan, it is divided into Jinjo cattle, Kobe cattle, Danma cattle, Matsusaka cattle, Miyazaki cattle, Saga cattle, Misawa cattle, etc. Among them, the most famous was the Danma cattle. This cow was also the same. The total weight of this cow was 940 kilograms, and a total of 31.5 kilograms of superior grade beef. When this weight was weighed, a lot of people were instantly shocked. This is a very scary amount of meat. The most important thing is that this cow is not the strongest cow in Suzuki. The strongest Wagyu cow hasn't appeared yet. When the news reached the backstage, the humble Japanese who have been staying in the corner couldn't help but raise their heads. Although Jiang Hai has no love for Japan, he has to admit that the Wagyu cow is indeed the strongest cow in the world. In the past 3 days, Suzuki has been lukewarm. They will take the initiative to nod and greet anyone they see. Even when all the companies are giving face to Cartwright, the people of Suzuki will also take the initiative to nod and greet Jiang Hai. No matter what they think, these guys at least do it on the surface. There is no way to find fault. Chapter 244. When the news about Bull 2 was sent to the backstage, the Japanese, who had always been cautious and humble, suddenly became more confident. But even so, they just stood at a distance and didn't come forward to communicate with others. This made it difficult for others to find trouble with them. Jiang Hai was from Bing City, and all the people in the northeast hated the Japanese. To be exact, all the people in Wuxia hated the Japanese. So, Jiang Hai also hated the Japanese. But he did not have any relationship with them. This made Jiang Hai unable to do anything to them. What's more, there was a guy in front of him who was looking for trouble with him, Rosalind Cartwright. The final result is out. 3 points. It is a very high result. Just when the people in the backstage were whispering to each other, the staff reported the final result. When they heard 3 points, everyone could not help but take a deep breath. With this result, it was not impossible for the Japanese to win the championship. Although the Angus cow from Cartwright Company was not bad, it was not easy to get 3 points. What's more, Suzuki Company had a bigger Wagyu cow. This cow was 3 points, then the Wagyu cow must be 5 points. Seems like the Japanese will be the winner this year. The people from the 2 companies next to them, Truman and Baveda, were whispering. However, they didn't care because their main project location was in the central and western parts of the United States. They just came to the east to join in the fun. The one who really lost face was the Cartwright Company. But now, Cartwright Company was not in the mood to care about the Japanese. In the eyes of Cartwright Company's manager, Rosalind Cartwright, it was better to let the Japanese win the title than to let Jiang Hai win the title. Letting the Japanese win the title, at least the Japanese will prove to the world that their beef is the best. They can accept losing to the Japanese in beef. Although they will be scolded when they return to the company, it was better than being kicked out. However, if he lost to Jiang Hai, it would mean that his backyard was on fire. That would be troublesome. Right now, his thoughts were probably similar to the Empress Dowager of the previous dynasty before the Wuxia. It was better to be an ally than a servant. Of course, Jiang Hai was not a slave of the Cartwright Company, but losing to a manor in the eastern region would make them lose face. What you need to pay attention to now is not to bicker with us, but to remember our bet. We are betting on whether you can become the champion. Otherwise you should prepare the 10 million. After He Nyo came down, the next one to come up was the Cartwright Company. Hearing the staff's words, Rosalind Cartwright chuckled disdainfully and then walked straight ahead. Soon he and the others brought the slaughtered cow to the front of the stage. Although the Cartwright Company was not very good, they had to admit that their selection of cows was not bad. A 755 kilograms cow was killed to 506 kilograms, which exceeded the highest average slaughter rate by 2 percentage points. After all, it was the strongest cow king selected from millions of cows. It was definitely comparable to the Japanese Nyo. Among the 506 kilograms of beef, 7 kilograms had reached the superior grade. The ratio of superior grade beef was as high as 8.4%. This kind of slaughter rate was very terrifying. In addition to the superior grade beef, there was also a lot of superior grade beef. This also made the people outside cheer unconsciously. In the end, this cow got a high score of 9.6. It was 0.3 points higher than the Japanese Nyo. In the eyes of these people, if the Japanese Nyo behind was not outstanding, then this cow might be today's champion. As for Jiang Hai's beautiful cow yesterday, no one remembered it. The people in front could not remember it because they would ignore it, but the people backstage knew something about yesterday's situation. When the people of the Cartwright Company stepped down again, Rosalind Cartwright deliberately glanced at Jiang Hai and smiled proudly. In his opinion, this result was almost guaranteed. Even if there was no way to beat the Suzuki Japanese Nyo, it would not be a problem to beat Jiang Hai's cow. Although he was worried that the quality of Jiang Hai's cow was good, even if the quality of the cow was good, Jiang Hai's 20,000 cows would not be able to reach 8.4% of the superior grade beef. If he had known that his cow was so good, perhaps he would not have gone to find trouble with Jiang Hai. Of course, on the surface he was completely unaware of this matter. Even if there was a problem, it would be Paul Cartwright's problem. It had nothing to do with him. Now he felt that he was being too cautious. How could someone like Jiang Hai be worthy of being his opponent? He was thinking too much. Seeing him walk down proudly, the corners of Jiang Hai's mouth twitched unconsciously. This guy was definitely courting death. After he came down, it was the turn of Suzuki's largest Japanese Nyo. After a while, a louder cheer was heard. Rosalind Cartwright, who had been very proud of himself, could not help but smile when he saw the data sent by the staff in front of him. Judging from the news, he might be in trouble this time. His opponent's Japanese Nyo had produced 67 kilograms of superior grade beef. Although this data was not very scary compared to the original weight of the Japanese Nyo, the quality of the beef was here. When this big piece of beef was thrown on the scale, not only the audience's eyes lit up, but also the judge's eyes. Sitting below, Zhang Dihai and Prawalton, as well as the purchasing staff of other companies, were all discussing in a low voice. This time, the people of Japan obviously came with bad intentions. This kind of beef was definitely the best in Japan or the United States. The 67 kilograms of superior grade beef was $700 per kilogram, so the beef alone was worth $46,900. In addition, there were nearly 200 kilograms of specially selected beef, which was $250 per kilogram, so that was more than $40,000. There were also some scraps of superior grade, standard grade, and commercial grade beef. After this calculation, the value of a Japanese Nyo was as high as $100,000. After this calculation, everyone present could not help but be stunned. Especially those who raised cattle, they had some difficulty breathing. The value of a Japanese Nyo was as high as $100,000. Even if it cost $50,000 to buy seeds and raise a cow, it would still make $50,000. In the United States, a middle-class family wouldn't even make $50,000 a year after paying taxes, but this cow was more than enough. This was just one Japanese Nyo. What if there were 10, 100, 1,000, or even 10,000 Japanese Nyo? They would make a fortune. Of course, they were just thinking about it. A Japanese Nyo of this level not only had to be selected from many herds, but also had to be specially raised. In fact, the cost of such a Japanese Nyo was about $60,000. If they were to sell it, they would have to deduct the tax. In fact, one Japanese Nyo could only make about $10,000 per Japanese Nyo. But even so, it was enough to make people go crazy. But when they thought about the status of this kind of Japanese Nyo, they could only sigh helplessly. Sometimes they thought too much. King Nyo, King Nyo, King Nyo. Seeing the Japanese Nyo being dissected on the stage, the audience could not help but shout. To them it was rare to see such an ox king. I still remember the last time I saw a Japanese Nyo that could produce more than 60 kilograms of premium beef. That was 30 years ago. You were not very old at that time. Looking at the Japanese Nyo on the stage that had been dissected, Zhang Dihai, who was sitting in the audience, said with a sigh. His son, who was beside him, heard his words and looked at him. Seeing the trace of loneliness on his father's face, he knew that he was thinking of his mother again. At this time he did not need to say anything. He just needed to let his father know that he was still by his side. So the man did not say anything. Instead he patted his father. I'm fine. By the way, didn't little Zhang's Nyo also enter the finals? None of them came out. It seems that the last two Japanese Nyo are his. I don't know if it's a blessing or a curse for him to follow this Japanese Nyo. Waving his hand, Zhang Dihai said softly with a smile. Then he changed the topic and said with a little surprise. Indeed, in a competition like this, the first place would definitely be the least popular, while the second place would be more popular. But to follow such a good Japanese Nyo, no one knew whether it was a blessing or a curse for Jiang Hai's Nyo. If Jiang Hai's Nyo was better than this Japanese Nyo, then needless to say the champion would naturally be Jiang Hai. But if Jiang Hai's Nyo was not as good as this Japanese Nyo, then it would be troublesome. So even Zhang Dihai was a little worried for Jiang Hai. At this moment the judges' scores were out. It was 9-7 points. If it wasn't for the fact that these people were Japanese, the scores would have been 9-8 or even 9 points. Actually, the Americans were also very xenophobic. Looks like you are going to lose 10 million. When the score came out, the people backstage were naturally happy and sad. Rosalind Carlyle, who was originally a little worried, felt a lot more relaxed at this time. 9-7. Although his Nyo lost, when he thought that he could step on Jiang Hai and make 10 million, the depression in his heart lessened. My Nyo hasn't appeared yet. Why are you in such a hurry? But I advise you to prepare 10 million first. You only have 1 hour. Glancing at Rosalind Carlyle, Jiang Hai raised a finger and said faintly. Then he led his men to take his first Nyo to the exhibition stage. As soon as he arrived at the exhibition stage, he saw the old man who said that he would go to his manor yesterday suddenly stand up. It was obvious that he was very interested in his Nyo. Jiang Hai also smiled at the people under the stage, then motioned to the butcher next to him to start cutting the Nyo. With Jiang Hai's instructions, the butcher instantly tore the cloth on Jiang Hai's Nyo. Chapter 245. Ha! The instant the cloth was lifted, a headless, skinless and tailed cow appeared before everyone's eyes. The picture of the perfect distribution of muscles and fats in the beef also appeared before everyone's eyes. For others, even if it was a poor marble pattern, it was still a marble pattern after all. Marble patterns represented the existence of a special grade, and such meat was usually wrapped in other muscles and the like. But for Jiang Hai's cow, the moment the cloth was lifted, the beef's back, chest, hooves and so on could be clearly seen. Marbled beef was clearly visible. Judging from the distribution of the beef, the whole cow was in the most symmetrical state. The size of the beef was not inferior to that of the Belgian blue cow, but the quality and fat distribution of the beef were far superior. Jiang Hai's cow looked like it was made of marbled beef. It did not look like a whole cow. Seeing this scene, the audience and the judges were in an uproar. That's impossible. The inside of the beef must be fake. Rosalind Carlyle, who was backstage, couldn't help but exclaim in surprise. Just his appearance alone was enough to kill everyone in seconds. Please cut it open. Jiang Hai, who was standing on the stage, heard Rosalind Carlyle's words, but he just chuckled. This guy was looking down on him. Was this kind of beef hard to come by? Jiang Hai was being irresponsible, but he had plenty of it. Hearing Jiang Hai's voice, the chef, who had been in a daze, came back to his senses. He smiled at Jiang Hai and watched seriously. Cutting a cow was a kung fu job. Otherwise, the ancient people of Wuxia would not have created an idiom for cutting a cow. Although the idiom had some mythical meaning, it also showed that it was not easy to understand a cow. The chef, who had been cutting cows for decades, had been specially invited by this exhibition. But at this time, facing Jiang Hai's cow, he couldn't bring himself to cut it. Because in his view, the whole cow was like a large piece of marbled beef. If he cut it, it would be a blasphemy to the beef. However, he could not go on like this. After hesitating for a while, he picked up the knife and cut the cow's back first. With this slash, not only was the neck bone of the cow exposed, the snow-white beef was also exposed from both sides. This beef is at least of the best quality. You know, this is the worst kind of beef. Seeing this scene, the judges were also in an uproar. A middle-aged man who looked about 50 years old could not help but shout. It's not just the best quality. I think it's even better than the best quality. Hearing his voice, a woman beside him also said in surprise, if the cow's neck was of this quality, then what about the rest? After the cow's neck was cut open, it was the cow's shoulder. If the meat on the side of the cow's neck was only the best quality beef, then the cow's shoulder could be said to be the best quality beef. The veins and lines on the beef were clearly visible. When people saw it, they felt their saliva secreting at an accelerated rate. Soon the knife was cut from the shoulder to the back. This was the most tender part of the beef, the top of the head. The moment the knife cut through the top of the head, almost the whole piece of beef emitted a dazzling light. When the beef was cut open, the marbled beef with a perfect flour-like arrangement of fat instantly entered the sight of these people. No, this is impossible. 5A Premium Snow Frost Beef. Oh my God, it's so big. Oh my God, this is impossible. Seeing the distribution of the beef, the people from Suzuki who had thought that they had won, could not help but shout loudly. As for Roslyn Cartwright of Cartwright, he was already numb after the first cut. He could not imagine how Jiang Hai had raised his cow. This was not scientific. This was impossible. But no matter how much he denied it in his heart, Jiang Hai's cow was still being cut on the stand. As the top of the head was cut open, the essence of the best beef was also displayed. After the top of the head, it was the eye meat. The eye meat was completely different from the top of the head. After the eye, it was the outer rib. Even if it was only 1/3 of the outer rib, it was still the best beef. Only the last 2/3 of the beef had degraded a little, but it could still be regarded as the best quality beef. Looking at such a big piece of beef, Zhang Dihai, Prawalton, and the other buyers below the stage did not dare to blink. Their hands were trembling as they stared at the beef. This was because they knew that this represented money, wealth, and everything. When it was about 1/3 of the outer rib, it fell from the best quality level to the best quality level. The master on the stand had long been shocked speechless by this piece of beef. Fortunately, the Americans were open-minded enough. After taking a few deep breaths, the master continued to cut the beef. With every cut, there would be a burst of exclamation from the crowd. Jiang Hai's beef cow had a total of 760 kilograms. Although it was larger than the average Angus bull, it could only be considered as a relatively large cow. The amount of meat it produced was also within the normal range. It produced 501 kilograms of beef, which was less than 66% of the total meat yield. However, the quality of the 501 kilograms of beef was indeed somewhat terrifying. With the help of the master and the staff, they lifted a big piece of beef and placed it on the first scale. Best quality beef, 108 kilograms. When the staff reported this number, the audience was instantly in an uproar. Jiang Hai touched his nose gently and smiled. American beef is not as finely divided as Japanese beef. Japanese beef is divided into 5 grades, 5A and 5 grades. 3A beef was actually similar to the best quality beef in the United States. 4A beef was the best quality beef in the United States. The best 5A beef was the core of Jiang Hai's beef. It was the best 5A beef, the frost snowflake beef. But now 5A and 4A beef were counted together. 108 kilograms, which was more than 20% of the best quality meat yield. In an instant, everyone was shocked speechless. Most people looked at Jiang Hai with fire in their eyes. As for Prawalton and Zhang Dihai, they chuckled. They were excited by their eyesight. They could have some relationship with Jiang Hai before Jiang Hai's beef became famous. This was a good thing for them. Best quality beef, 302 kilograms. Best quality beef, 24 kilograms. Best quality beef, 24 kilograms. Best quality beef, 0 kilograms. When the staff reported Jiang Hai's beef, the audience was in an even bigger uproar. According to the average price of 1 kilogram of premium beef, 5 kilograms of specially selected beef was $250, and 1 kilogram of preferred beef was $100. Jiang Hai's premium beef was worth $75,600, specially selected beef was worth $75,500, and specially selected beef was worth $7,600. Just based on this alone, the standard beef was worth $158,700, and the preferred beef was worth $158,700. One beef could be sold for $160,000. At this moment, in the eyes of these people, Jiang Hai's beef was almost drowned in green dollar bills. This kind of beef did not seem to exist in this world. That's incredible. Looking at the prices of the beef on the stage, even Zhang Dihai, who knew that Jiang Hai wasn't ordinary from the beginning, was a little dazed. He couldn't help but clap as he spoke with a serious expression. He had thought that Jiang Hai's beef would be good, but he really didn't expect it to be this good. It was so good that it was a little scary. Could such a number really be reflected by a single cow? He knew that Jiang Hai had 20,000 cows. Each cow cost $150,000, so 20,000 cows would be $3 billion. Even if the highest state tax and national tax were deducted, 35% of the national tax and 5% of the state tax were deducted. That was 40%. If Jiang Hai paid the full amount of taxes, he could still earn $8 billion. Not to mention that he was the owner of a manor, and the state would reduce the taxes to a certain extent. Jiang Hai could earn at least $2 billion. Thinking of this, Zhang Dihai felt that his throat was a little dry. It must be noted that Jiang Hai had only been in this world for half a year at most. To earn $2 billion in half a year, he felt that either the world or he had gone crazy. The only person who couldn't possibly go crazy was Jiang Hai. As for the judges, they didn't know what to do. They had never seen such a beef cow before. It was really dozens of streets ahead of other beef cows. 10 points was a perfect score because other people could only get 10 points, but for Jiang Hai it was only 10 points. If there was more than 10 points, they wouldn't hesitate to give it more than 10 points. That was the gap between them. Impossible, impossible, this guy must have cheated. How is this possible? How can there be such a beef cow? I don't believe it. Just as the judges were thinking about how many points they should give Jiang Hai, Lu Qing had already gone crazy. Rosalind Carlyle, who was backstage, had already gone crazy. Bribery was rare in the United States, and in order to ensure the fairness of the convention, it was impossible for this beef show to have blatant shady dealings. If the quality of the beef was similar, there might be some favoritism. However, Jiang Hai's beef was clearly dozens of streets ahead of the others. There was no dispute about this championship. It was precisely because of this dispute that Lu Qing couldn't believe. Therefore, without saying a word, he ran to the front stage while shouting. When he saw that the 10th cow was about to move forward, he directly rushed over. Chapter 246. The security guards were stunned when they saw Rosalind rushing over. They had never thought that Rosalind would attack someone else's work at this time. Their reaction was a little slow, but Belle, who was next to Jiang Hai, reacted immediately. Rosalind Carlyle was just an ordinary person. Not to mention Jiang Hai, Belle alone was enough to put him on the stage first. But Jiang Hai waved his hand and stopped him. He looked at this guy with a playful expression. He probably understood what this guy was thinking. He wanted to cut open the second cow so that everyone could see what kind of special method Jiang Hai used to raise the cow like this. It was raised in such a way that did not conform to the rules of science. Jiang Hai let him do it because he was confident that his cows were good. Although these 15 cows were given special treatment, they were still slightly better than the 20,000 cows. However, the 20,000 cows were also good. True gold fears no fire. Jiang Hai was not afraid that the country would swallow up his manor. If he was willing to let him do it, then Jiang Hai would not care about it. Sure enough, Rosalind Carlyle ran in front of Jiang Hai's second cow in a few steps. He pushed away the staff who were carrying the cow and tore off the cloth covering the cow. With this tug, not only was he dumbfounded, even the people below the stage were dumbfounded. The cow's body was the same as the cow from before. It was covered in marbled beef. Just by looking at the quality, the two cows were almost the same. Such a thing had already exceeded the people's imagination. What the hell was going on? This is impossible, this is impossible. Looking at the bull in front of him, Rosalind Carlyle couldn't help but take a step back. His face was full of disbelief. Although losing to Suzuki was shameful, he could still accept it. But losing to Jiang Hai and losing so miserably, he couldn't accept it. At this time, the security personnel came up again and put him aside. He must have used some method. Otherwise the beef would not be like this. Let me go. I want to expose this guy. He must have fed the cow something illegal. While being pulled down, Rosalind Carlyle couldn't care less and yelled at Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai chuckled and beckoned to Belle casually. Belle took out the tactical dagger he always carried with him. In the United States, gun control was very strict, but some people were allowed to carry guns on the streets. However, cold weapons like knives and crossbows were absolutely not allowed on the streets. Of course, there were exceptions to everything. For example, Bell, a retired soldier from the Delta State, could carry these weapons. After taking the tactical dagger from Bell, Jiang Hai walked to the pile of superior-grade beef. He gently cut off a piece and stuffed it directly into his mouth. Jiang Hai was not willing to eat raw beef, but at this time, this was undoubtedly the most confident way to do it. My cows don't even eat fodder. My cows only eat the grass in my manor in spring, summer, and autumn. In winter they only eat the hay in my manor. Besides that, I don't even eat corn or soybeans. My cows could be said to be in perfect condition. I even dare to eat them raw. If you have any doubt, you can send them to the most authoritative testing agency for testing. If you find anything illegal on my beef cows, you can sue me at any time. Looking at the crowd below, Jiang Hai said lightly. Rosslyn was even more furious when he heard Jiang Hai's words. You're talking nonsense, you liar, you bastard. Looking at Jiang Hai's confident expression, Rosslyn roared loudly. The reason why he was like this was because he knew that he was finished this time. Losing 10 million was a small matter. Losing to the Japanese was also a small matter. However, to be slapped in the face by the owner of a manor in his own territory was not a small matter. Perhaps the families overseas did not care as much about their reputation as the families in China. But no matter what, they still cared about face. After such a thing happened, it would be strange if they felt comfortable in their hearts. And if those old men were uncomfortable, it meant that his career was over. In the future, not to mention his current position as the general manager, just the position of the first successor in the future was estimated to be empty words. But at this time, no one would think about his words anymore. Because Jiang Hai's actions proved that he was not afraid of eating the beef. This was the magnanimity of a manor owner. Secondly, everyone remembered. Before these beef cattle were slaughtered, they had to be tested to make sure that there was no disease or something like that. Since the beef cattle could be on the stage, it meant that these beef cattle had been tested and there was no problem. Although everyone was very curious about how Jiang Hai raised his beef cattle, they guessed that he did not feed them anything bad. Rosalind Carlyle was dragged away by the security guards, and the judges gave the final score. The 6 judges had nothing to say. They all gave a full score of 10. As the score was given, the audience applauded thunderously. Indeed, with this kind of strength, getting 10 points was absolutely well-deserved. Young man, congratulations. When the 6 judges raised their hands, the host next to them opened his mouth and did not know what to say. This New York beef cattle exhibition had been held more than 10 times, but this was the first time that someone had scored 10 points. It was estimated that it would be difficult for someone to break this score in the future. Because 10 points was the upper limit, there was no need to calculate it. It was directly a full score of 10 points. Therefore he took the microphone and went to Jiang Hai, saying to him with a smile, "Thank you." Hearing the other party's words, Jiang Hai also smiled and shook his hand. Although this result was not beyond his expectations to be able to get 10 points for him, it was still a very good thing. You are too polite. I really didn't expect that your cattle not only looked good, but the quality of the beef was even better. Anyway, the title of Beef King is definitely yours. The host patted Jiang Hai's shoulder. He had seen a lot of cattle over the years, but this was the first time that he was so willing to call someone the Beef King. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai also smiled. For him, this was indeed a good thing to be happy about. The next thing was very simple. After this cow was carried away, the next one came on the stage. The quality of this cow was almost exactly the same as the previous one, but in order to distinguish the first and second place, someone gave it 9 points. But even so, this cow still won the second place. Next, all the beef company's representatives came forward, and the organizer gave out the awards. Although it was called an award ceremony, it was actually just a small amount of money. The first place winner, Beef King, was awarded $500,000, the second place winner was $100,000, the third place winner was $50,000, and the fourth to eighth place winners were each awarded $2,000, which was considered a consolation prize. Jiang Hai alone received $600,000 in addition to 2 medals. Unfortunately, they were not pure gold or silver but plated. Presumably, the people in the United States would not be so generous as to actually use gold to make medals. But after getting this title, Jiang Hai's manor became popular. After everything was over, the New York Beef Show officially came to an end. But for Jiang Hai, after he went backstage, the busiest time had just arrived. With the title of King of Oxen, Jiang Hai's manor returned victorious. When Jiang Hai returned to the backstage with the 2 beef cows, the people from the major livestock companies, who were only interested in him, immediately surrounded him. "Hello, Mr. Jiang Hai, I'm from Truman Company. If you want to sell your beef cows and need a middleman, I think our company will be your best helper. Mr. Jiang Hai, I'm from Baveda Company. We will help you open up a market in the United States. As for the price, you don't have to worry at all. We will give you the best price. Mr. Jiang Hai, we are from Lacanus Company. Mr. Jiang Hai, we are from Aveda Company. Originally, because of the face of the Cartwright Company, the companies that had been a little cold to Jiang Hai were like cats that smelled blood at this time. They swarmed up and instantly surrounded Jiang Hai, constantly talking to him. Hearing their words, Jiang Hai didn't say a word. Maybe for them this kind of thing was common. The weak were prey to the strong. When Jiang Hai hadn't shown his strength, it was normal for them to side with Cartwright Company and step on Jiang Hai. Now that Jiang Hai was rising, they naturally had to curry favor with Jiang Hai. This was the law of this country, the game of crocodiles. They didn't believe in the law or tears. The only thing they believed in was money. But unfortunately, Jiang Hai was a young man who grew up under the red flag. When he was young, his teacher told him that money wasn't everything. Although it was impossible to do without money, he was different from ordinary businessmen. He was a narrow-minded person. Since these guys treated him like that just now, it was impossible for him to bury the hatchet with these people now. So Jiang Hai didn't say a word. He pushed them away and went to his car. After getting in the car, Jiang Hai started the engine and left with the beef. They could deal with the beef on their own. It was up to them whether to eat or sell. According to Robin's idea, of course, they wanted to take advantage of this opportunity to sell the beef. However, Jiang Hai didn't care at this time. For him, the gain and loss of a beef cow didn't matter. This was because he had already opened up a bigger market. Just as he had expected, his beef had become a hit. Chapter 247. Listening to Zhang Dihai's voice on the phone, Jiang Hai smiled. Xiao Jiang, I got your wine. When will you come to get it? And your tea tree, you can come and pick it up, but you have to sell me some beef. Okay, I'll be right there. After hanging up the phone, Jiang Hai said goodbye to Delina and Marian, who were studying. Then he left home and drove his shield to Boston. Today was the third day after the beef show ended. After the beef show ended, Jiang Hai was harassed all night. There was no other way. All the major livestock companies wanted to talk to Jiang Hai about the sales of his beef cattle. After all, in their eyes it was money, real money. In addition to these livestock companies, there were many private companies such as the Suzuki Company in Japan. They wanted to cooperate with Jiang Hai to see if they could import Jiang Hai's cattle. Of course, it was impossible. Later, Jiang Hai was so annoyed that he took the initiative to drive to the cattle shed. After staying there for a night, they checked out the next morning and rushed back to Boston. Naturally, the way was the same as when they came. They walked and stopped, but the mentality of Luo Binci and the others was completely different. When they came, they were very confident about their beef cattle, but it was a competition. Who could say for sure? Therefore, they needed to be 30% confident, 20% anxious, and 50% nervous. Fortunately, the result was not beyond their expectations, so they were a lot more relaxed on the way back. Luo Binci, who hardly spoke or smiled when they came, finally showed a smile on his face when they went back. After a long day's journey, they returned to the manor. Back at the manor, they naturally celebrated. This was a very good victory. It was foreseeable that as long as Jiang Hai nodded, these 20,000 cattle would be turned into countless dollars, drowning them. It showed that they were a little nervous before they sold these cattle. They were afraid that Jiang Hai's cattle couldn't be sold. After all, this manor cost a lot of money in Jiang Hai's hands. But now it seemed that not to mention 280 million, even 8 billion didn't matter because Jiang Hai could earn it back. Of course, if it was really 8 billion, then Jiang Hai wouldn't buy it. This has nothing to do with his IQ, it's because he doesn't have that much money. Back home, naturally, they ate big pieces of meat and drank big mouthfuls of wine. They tossed around until 3 o'clock in the morning before everyone fell asleep. The next morning, when Jiang Hai got up, even with his physical fitness, he felt some pain all over his body. But fortunately, after running and sweating, the soreness disappeared, but he still felt a little weak. He had been lying at home for a whole day. Today he finally recovered, but just as he recovered, he received a call from Elder Zhang. With the roar of an engine, Jiang Hai also arrived at Elder Zhang's store in Boston. However, at this time, old Zhang wasn't the only person in the store. There was also a little girl standing there, curiously looking at Jiang Hai. Seeing the little girl's gaze, Jiang Hai also smiled at her. However, this smile scared the little girl and she hid behind old Zhang, still looking at Jiang Hai with a charming expression. Jiang Hai had seen this girl before. She was the granddaughter that Elder Zhang brought to the beef cattle show that day. You are an adult, why are you scaring my granddaughter? You two, why are you so timid? You didn't inherit your grandfather at all, you are becoming more and more like your father. Let's go, get in the car. Seeing his granddaughter being scared by Jiang Hai, Elder Zhang couldn't help but glare at Jiang Hai. Elder Zhang's love for his granddaughter was 200%. Although Elder Zhang's face was a bit strict, Jiang Hai could see that the atmosphere of doting was more than anything else. Regarding this, Jiang Hai just smiled. Recently, his relationship with Delina and Marion was getting closer and closer. He also had this feeling of doting on them, which was difficult for people who had never been a father to understand. After opening the back door and the front passenger seat, Elder Zhang and the girl got in the car. Let's go. After fastening the seat belt, old Zhang also told Jiang Hai an address. Then the three of them rushed to old Zhang's house. When they were in the car, because there was a little girl sitting behind them, the two just chatted casually. After the car arrived at the place, the little girl immediately opened the door and ran into the manor in front of them. Indeed, it was not an exaggeration to say that Elder Zhang's house was a manor. Of course, it couldn't be compared with Jiang Hai's manor, but it was still small. The whole manor was divided into 3 parts. The first part was a 3-story villa covering an area of about 300 square meters. The total area of the 3 stories was more than 900 square meters. Jiang Hai couldn't see whether there was a basement or not. With this villa as the dividing line, there was a garden in front, covering an area of about 1,000 square meters. Behind the villa, there were several independent places connected with the villa. Jiang Hai looked around and saw a swimming pool and a tennis court. In this way, Elder Zhang's house was really not small. At least it looked more like a home than Jiang Hai's house. Are you curious where this old man got so much money to live in such a luxurious place? Looking at Jiang Hai's slightly puzzled eyes, Elder Zhang smiled and said. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but touch his nose. He was a little curious. I remember that you and the girl from the Walton family seem to have some friendship. It seems that she didn't tell you clearly. Seeing Jiang Hai's appearance, Elder Zhang smiled and led Jiang Hai into the villa while introducing his own situation. My name is Zhang Dihai. My father once fought in the anti-Japanese war for 8 years in China. Later he became an official and a general. However, after the Japanese were defeated, our country also changed dynasties. At that time our family didn't follow Elder Jiang. Oh, I'm not talking about you. We didn't follow the leader to Taiwan province. Instead we came to the United States. With the family business we earned in China, we set up the first Chinese supermarket in the United States. Later it was proven that our family still had some business acumen. Jiang Hai walked while telling Elder Zhang's story. In fact, Elder Zhang's background was quite simple. When he was young he came to the United States with his father. His father set up the first Chinese supermarket in San Francisco. Because he was a soldier in the past, coupled with a group of loyal subordinates following him, he dared to fight and fight. At that time, the Gray Society in the United States didn't dare to trouble them. They gradually developed and opened more than a dozen branches in San Francisco. At this time his father passed the supermarket to him, and this brand became bigger and bigger in his hands. Then he attacked other cities in California. When California was conquered, he began to attack the entire United States. Although it couldn't be compared with some retail giants, the C-Commerce Group had more than 300 Chinese supermarkets in the United States. Zhang Dihai was the current chairman of the C-Commerce Group. He had a total of 3 sons. The eldest son was the current president of the C-Commerce Group. He was mainly based in the headquarters, which was near California. The second son was a scholar, a professor at Harvard University. He was the middle-aged man that Jiang Hai saw before. His name was Zhang Liangkai. Because the old man had retired, he had nothing to do anyway. Instead of staying in California and not being able to see the shadow of his eldest son all day, it was better to retire with his second son. Elder Zhang didn't mention his third son, so Jiang Hai didn't ask in detail. When the two walked into the villa, Jiang Hai also had a general understanding of Elder Zhang's situation. He was the owner of a supermarket that owned more than 300 supermarkets, but it wasn't listed. It was completely his own brand's boss. It was hard to calculate his specific wealth. Jiang Hai already understood the reason why he wanted to buy beef. The things sold in Chinese supermarkets were originally more expensive than ordinary supermarkets in the United States. At this time, adding a high-quality beef counter was also something that attracted people's attention. However, if they sold beef that could be bought in ordinary supermarkets, then they would suffer a lot of losses. This was because the things they sold were originally expensive because the things they sold were not available in ordinary supermarkets. If they sold ordinary beef, then they couldn't sell it more expensive than in supermarkets. They could only sell those that had a price but no market. Jiang Hai's beef naturally met their requirements. Not to mention the special grade, even the special grade and the best grade beef was actually not very common in supermarkets. After all, this was not the price of beef that belonged to the general public. $50 a pound of beef was not something that ordinary people could enjoy in the United States. So Jiang Hai understood what Elder Jiang meant. Elder Jiang, just say it, how much do you want? After pondering for a while, Jiang Hai was now waiting for a good price, but he knew that although his beef was good, the premise was that it could be sold, and now he really needed some money to go back and forth. The feeling of having no money on him made him feel quite uncomfortable. How much do you have? Hearing Jiang Hai's straightforward words, old Jiang also smiled. In fact, his temperament was very similar to Jiang Hai's. He didn't like to beat around the bush. If there was something to say, it was better to say it directly. I have a lot. There are nearly 20,000 cattle in my manor, including 13,455 bulls, 5,231 cows, and 872 calves. All the bulls have reached the age of slaughter, and I can guarantee that each of them is not much worse than Robin's 1 and 2. Looking at Elder Jiang in front of him, Jiang Hai said seriously, "This is really a big business." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Elder Jiang's eyes couldn't help but light up, and he whispered in a low voice. According to Jiang Hai, even if a cow is worth $150,000, 13,455 bulls is $2 billion. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.